After discarding his humanity to become a demon, he was finally struck down by the man they called the hero. Standing over his fallen foe, the hero expressed pity for a soul swallowed by darkness, wondering why he chose such a path. Defeated, the man spat a final curse at the commoner hero, declaring that if his death secured his family's vengeance, it was a price he'd gladly pay. As his body dissolved into a black mist, he remembered his past, a desperate struggle to prove his family's innocence that drove him to demonic power. Even after death, his soul endured, trapped in a hellish cycle of being devoured by the very demons he once commanded. He lost track of time as the agony stretched on for years, perhaps even decades. No matter how many times he prayed for the torment to end, the nightmare continued without mercy. At last, only a single, flickering fragment of his soul remained. He felt a fleeting sense of relief, believing the end had finally come. But then, something changed. His consciousness suddenly sharpened, his thoughts coalescing as he realized, now finally, I can rest. Instead, a young boy jolted upright in bed, gasping for air with eyes wide in sheer disbelief. He scanned the ornate room, a place that felt both alien and hauntingly familiar, wondering if this was some cruel trick of the afterlife. His gaze fell upon a shimmering object, and a sudden wave of nostalgia crashed over him as he realized where he was. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the first real lungful of air he'd tasted in what felt like an eternity. He could actually breathe again. As that realization set in, his other senses flooded back. He could move his hands. He had a body of flesh and bone, and a voice to call his own. Staggering to the window, he felt the warmth of the sun against his skin under a pristine sky. For a moment, he thought he was in heaven, but the memory of his demonic corruption quickly crushed that hope. As he grappled with the impossible, a shimmering screen of light materialized before him, congratulating him on becoming a seeker. Though his soul should have been annihilated, he decided to test the reality of this vision, whispering the command, "Open menu." He stared at the floating text, a form of magic unlike anything he had ever seen. While he feared it might be a demonic trap or a cruel illusion, it was the only lead he had to explain his current situation. The menu expanded to reveal his status, skills, and quests. Stunned, he read the name. Salim Bergman, the 14-year-old eldest son of a duke, holding the title of Seeker with a level of -51. A jolt of shock surged through him. He was 14 again, yet he remembered becoming a demon at 17. And over a decade had passed since his defeat. The timeline simply didn't add up. Turning to the mirror, he saw a boy with a lean frame and vibrant silver-blonde hair, the same color his mother used to praise before it turned dull and rough during his descent into darkness. Desperate for answers, he checked his skills tab, only to find it completely empty. 2 words stared back at him, mocking his previous life's talent. No skills. It was a staggering blow. In his past life, he had been a magical prodigy. He opened his message box to find a welcome note defining a seeker as one who walks a righteous path to avoid demonic temptation, a second chance to train his heart. A new quest flickered to life. Reach Seeker level 30 to resist demonic temptation. Looking at his current level of -51, a wave of horror washed over him. If he couldn't raise his level, history was destined to repeat itself. Reeling from the revelation, he's pulled back into his memories. All he ever craved was the power to exact his revenge. He envisions his older self, a man consumed by a dark ambition that turned him into an enemy of humanity, yet he embraced it without hesitation. With that strength, he could finally crush the hero who humiliated him, along with the arrogant Marquis's daughter and the haughty princess who dared to look down on him. He refused to lose to anyone ever again. This insatiable hunger for power was forged in the fires of deep-seated shame. He vividly recalls the stinging disappointment in his father's eyes and the pity of their retainers. Labeled as weak and worthless after losing to a commoner boy and being outclassed by the princess, a fracture formed in his heart, a crack just wide enough for demonic temptation to begin seeping in. That temptation eventually warped his reality, as echoes from his past reminded him of his utter helplessness. He relives the agonizing moment the blonde princess branded him a demon, right as his humanity and emotions were being twisted beyond recognition. With a desperate cry, she unleashed a lethal torrent of ice directly at him. But her magic was futile. He tanked the assault, his wounds regenerating almost instantly. The princess, a warrior hailed as an equal to the first king, could only stare in paralyzed disbelief. Looming over her, he laughed at her pathetic groveling and swore that her head would be his next trophy. Before he could strike, however, the commoner hero arrived. Selim turned to face the intruder, immediately recognizing the ill-mannered orphan who had always stood in his way. A sneer twisted his face as he spat out his pure, unadulterated hatred for the hero's insufferably righteous existence. That final battle marked the absolute nadir of his descent, the grim fate awaiting anyone foolish enough to surrender to demonic temptation. He was ultimately cut down by the hero, and his soul was cast into the abyss to be devoured by demons over and over again. Snapping back from the depths of that nightmare, the truth finally clicks. His soul possessed such immense magical potential that the demons who fed on it grew unstoppable, eventually triggering the kingdom's collapse. He realizes he lacked the strength to resist, though perhaps the barriers of mankind were already failing, allowing the darkness to seep through. He was just the first domino to fall. Now, a single quest echoes in his mind: reach Seeker level 30. If he can grow stronger, he might actually forge a different destiny. He remembers that feeling, the desperate, frantic clawing for any scrap of strength. He never truly intended to lose his mind, much less destroy his kingdom, but his craving for power had overridden everything else. With that painful admission, he draws a sharp breath, and a newfound resolve burns in his eyes. He contemplates the path ahead as ethereal notifications begin materializing in the air. A welcome message followed by the start of his main and daily quests. Reaching out, he touches the glowing text, wondering if this strange system is truly the key to fortifying his heart and increasing his level. The system responds, detailing his new daily quest: complete a prayer and perform one good deed to earn experience points. He sighs, weighing the tasks before him. Deciding to start with the prayer, he clasps his hands together. But at first, nothing happens. Just as doubt begins to surface, a notification pings. The prayer is complete. He's stunned, realizing he's never actually prayed with true sincerity before, and that his mindset was the missing piece. However, his experience points haven't budged yet. He still needs to perform a good deed. The requirement is vague, but he decides that a donation to the church is a good place to start. As the carriage rattles down the road, he gazes out the window at the breathtaking scenery, painted in the vibrant hues of autumn. The sight stirs an unexpected emotion within him. He muses that getting sentimental over a view is something an old man would do, not a 14-year-old boy, but he can't help it. The memories of a much longer, far more tormented life are still vivid in his mind. This simple moment feels profound. The stunning landscape, the gentle breeze, and the rhythmic sway of the carriage are all incredibly soothing. He cherishes this fleeting peace, a stark contrast to the decade of eternal agony he spent watching his soul be devoured by demons. Touching his face, he grapples with disbelief. He initially suspected this was all a cruel illusion woven by a demon, or perhaps a final flashback as his soul flickered out. But the sensations are far too vivid and real to be a mere dream. His introspection is interrupted by a familiar voice. It's Katya, his personal guard and swordsmanship tutor. He remembers her as a brilliant and fiercely skilled warrior with a pure heart. As a half-elf, her long lifespan means she hasn't aged a day. Noticing his distant expression, she asks if something is weighing on his mind. Katya is clearly taken aback by his uncharacteristically subdued demeanor. Her concern is obvious as she asks what's wrong, questioning his sudden humility and even offering to head back to the castle. He quickly insists he's fine, telling her not to coddle him like an invalid. Internally, he's haunted by a painful truth. In his previous life, Katya eventually left, disgusted by his corruption. He believed that if even she abandoned him, his downfall was truly inevitable, so he offers a sincere apology for causing her worry. His apology seems to ease her tension, though a hint of confusion still lingers in her eyes. She lets out a soft sigh, her expression finally softening. "I see," she says quietly. "I beg your pardon, then." He realizes she was only worrying because she didn't trust him, a revelation that makes him regret his earlier irritability. He thanks her, assuring her he's perfectly fine, and resolves to be more careful moving forward. He knows he needs to overhaul the way he communicates with others, recalling the system's warning to avoid suspicious behavior. His mention of a mysterious board left her utterly bewildered. When she asked for clarification, he was shocked that she couldn't see it. Sensing the need for discretion, she quietly urged her young master to lower his hand, understanding that this phenomenon was visible only to him. He explained that it was a supernatural interface that appeared whenever he focused his intent, displaying his level and the experience points needed to grow stronger. Finding its default name cumbersome, he decided to dub it the Seeker System. Upon arriving at their destination, Salim presented his donation. A cleric from the church expressed her effusive gratitude, marveling at the generosity of a single gold coin coming from the young heir of the Duke. He assumed a gold coin, enough to sustain a commoner for a month, would easily clear his daily quest, but the Seeker System declared otherwise. He had squandered the people's tax money, resulting in a 500-point experience penalty and a level drain. The shock was immediate. The system deemed the donation a waste. His blood boiled as he remembered the truth. This church was corrupt, and its greed had paved the way for the kingdom's fall to the demons. His fury triggered yet another penalty. The system informed him that for losing control of his emotions, another 50 experience points had been docked. He was stunned by its ruthlessness. Even his private thoughts carried a heavy price. He clenched his fists, desperately trying to steady his breathing while Katya watched, perplexed by his sudden distress. Struggling to regain his composure, he told Katya they were finished there. He insisted on a walk through town, admitting he needed a breather before his temper completely boiled over. As they navigated the town square, a rich, pleasant aroma caught his attention. He paused, sniffing the air, and wondered aloud if he was smelling chocolate. His nose led them to a nearby shop, its windows displaying rows of meticulously crafted and delectable-looking confections. He sighed, feeling drained by the system's relentless demands. A sudden, powerful craving for sweets hit him, but he hesitated, fearing that indulging himself might trigger another penalty. Ultimately, he decided he'd had enough. Casting his worries aside, he pointed decisively at the display and ordered one of everything. He handed a box to Katya, explaining it was a gift for her constant support. Flustered, she questioned if she truly deserved such a treat, but he insisted, noting how hard she worked for him. As she accepted the gift, he remarked on how popular the shop had become. Her face lit up with pure joy, and she thanked him profusely. The Seeker System reacted instantly to her happiness, granting him 10 experience points. Furthermore, by making her smile, he had fulfilled both the one good deed and prayer quests, earning a massive 500 experience points and a level increase. He stared in disbelief, stunned that such a simple gesture yielded a greater reward than his massive donation. This brought his current level up to -51. His confusion quickly turned to suspicion. He couldn't grasp the system's logic, feeling its judgments were bizarre. These weren't divine decrees. They felt more like a demonic trick. After the tragedy of his past life, he wondered what this entity truly expected of him now. Whether the system was the work of a god or a devil, he decided it didn't matter. He needed its power. The next morning, he resolved to tackle his daily quests regardless of his physical age. He greeted his maid, Mari, and immediately began brainstorming what good deed he could perform today. He looked closely at Mari, the woman who had cared for him since infancy, realizing how young she must have been at this time. For now, he concluded that his best path forward was to play by the system's rules and focus entirely on raising his level. Putting his plan into action, he offered Mari the chocolate he had purchased the day before. The maid gasped, completely caught off guard by the sudden gift. She stammered her thanks, privately baffled by her young master's unusual behavior. He waited for a notification, but the system remained silent. This puzzled him. Giving to the corrupt church resulted in a penalty, while giving Katya a gift she hadn't asked for gave him experience. He began to theorize that the rewards depended entirely on the worthiness of the recipient. With a new hypothesis in mind, he decided his next move would be a donation to the city orphanage. He instructed Mari to arrange a visit for that afternoon, once his studies and training were finished. Though surprised by the request, the maid confirmed the arrangements. That afternoon, upon arriving at the orphanage, he observed the well-maintained grounds and the laughter of happy children. It appeared to be an honest institution. He approached the matron, offering a coin and requesting she use it to provide the children with a proper feast. The woman accepted with tears of gratitude, promising to put the funds to good use. His experiment was a resounding success. The seeker system confirmed a 100 EXP gain for the donation, plus an additional 500 EXP for completing his daily objectives. Clenching his fist in triumph, he finally understood the secret. As long as his actions genuinely improved someone's life, the system would reward him. Turning to the orphanage matron with a confident smile, Salim pledged his unwavering support for the children's welfare. He urged her to reach out for anything they might need, leaving the woman overwhelmed with gratitude. Taking him at his word, she mentioned the children were shivering without winter blankets. Salim readily agreed to deliver them by morning, realizing that funding these facilities was the perfect way to farm his daily quests. But his simple plan hit a snag the moment he returned home. His maid, Mari, announced that his swordsmanship tutor had arrived, while the rest of the staff swamped him with endless documents for approval. The crushing weight of responsibility was starting to take its toll. Between his studies, training, and managing the estate in his parents' absence, he was exhausted. He decided to send a servant with the blankets instead of going himself, assuming the system would still count the deed. Soon after, the servant returned with a heartfelt thank you letter from the orphanage, but no system notification appeared. Salim stared at the paper in confusion, wondering if a good deed only counted if he performed it with his own two hands. As the implications sank in, a dark thought crossed his mind. If kindness required personal action, was the inverse also true? Could he potentially commit evil by proxy without the system holding him responsible? To test this theory, he summoned Marie and gave her a bizarre order: break a branch off a nearby plant. Startled, the maid hesitated, but she ultimately gave in and followed his command. The system's response was swift and brutal. He was docked 10 EXP for harming a plant, proving he was responsible for the actions of his subordinates. But when he tried to brainstorm loopholes, the system slapped him with a massive 100 EXP penalty for intent to cheat. Shaken by the deduction, he dismissed Mari. The maid, who had been lingering in the cozy warmth of his study, apologized for overstaying her welcome and hurried out. As she left, he heard her mention how chilly the servants' waiting room was. She remarked that while they had magical heaters, only a high-ranking noble like him could afford to keep a room so perfectly warm. She explained that while his heater was powered by his own massive mana pool, the servants had to fuel their devices with their own meager supplies, resulting in nothing more than a faint, ineffective warmth. Salim realized that the mana servants could spare was minuscule compared to a noble's. Since smoke and soot were banned in the mansion, they were forced to rely on these weak magical devices. Realizing he had ignored their plight, he decided to inspect the break room himself. Acting on impulse, he strode toward the servants' quarters. Mari and the other maids watched in absolute shock as their young master suddenly burst through the door. The maids were baffled to see him during their break, but Salim focused on the heater. It was barely functioning. Closing his eyes, he flooded the device with his own immense mana, instantly transforming the room's temperature. The system immediately rewarded his kindness with 100 EXP. Combined with the 500 EXP from completing 2 daily quests, he finally leveled up. While the maids basked in the warmth, Salim quietly celebrated his victory. He began to contemplate the nature of kindness. He reasoned that if he kept the heating system fueled every day, he'd not only keep his staff happy, but he'd also have a consistent way to clear his daily quests. He doubted the system would remain that generous forever, but he didn't care. Even if he stopped receiving experience for it, he resolved to keep the room warm for them every single night. This selfless vow triggered another notification. 300 EXP for possessing a selfless heart. He was stunned. The system tracked his thoughts just as closely as his actions. This mental surveillance was, by far, the most terrifying part of his new reality. Mari noticed his troubled expression, remarking that he had seemed like a completely different person all morning. Salim took her words to heart before asking her a serious question. If she had to do one good deed today, what would it be? He reflected on his past life. At 14 years old, with the academy entrance exams looming, he had been buried in his studies. Back then, the stress would cause him to lash out, constantly screaming at the servants over the smallest mistakes. His newfound resolve earns praise from Mari, who finds his effort to mature before departing for the royal capital truly admirable. Internally, Salim begs the system not to penalize him for his past outbursts, finally acknowledging that senseless shouting is beneath him. When he asks for her thoughts on performing good deeds, Mari suggests simply picking up litter around town. To her horror, Salim enthusiastically agrees, forcing her to protest that a high-ranking young master cannot be seen performing such menial labor. The harsh reality of social hierarchy sets in, and he realizes with dread that if the heir of a ducal house were caught scavenging trash, he'd be disowned instantly. His simple daily quest has suddenly evolved into a complex nightmare of class politics. This frustration leads his thoughts down a darker path. Perhaps running away would be easier, allowing him to focus solely on grinding levels. He recalls the demon invasion that annihilated the kingdom and the frustrating power of the hero who eventually struck him down. He wonders if living as a hermit in hiding would allow him to avoid the demonic temptations that triggered his original transformation. However, he knows this plan is flawed, as personal escape won't stop the impending apocalypse, an invasion he knows will be fueled by the church's deep-seated corruption. Abandoning thoughts of flight, he resolves to save the kingdom while maintaining his status. He rejects monster hunting and donations as viable daily quests and turns back to Mari, demanding a practical idea for a repeatable good deed. His intense pressure frightens Mari, triggering a system alert that deducts 50 experience points for intimidating her. Stunned, Salim offers a sincere apology that moves Mari to tears, making him realize just how cruel his former self must have been. Unable to find a suitable daily task, Salim seeks advice from an older tutor regarding his academy preparations. She proposes crafting magical tools for the impoverished, noting that while enchantment magic usually ignores the poor due to low profits, it is exactly where research is needed most. His tutor suggests that designing tools from the perspective of others is the ultimate training, but the boy seems overwhelmed by the prospect of inventing something new every single day. Despite his initial hesitation, he agrees that the study is intriguing and begins sketching out ideas, while his tutor watches closely to see what his brilliant mind produces next. A spark of inspiration hits, and he asks a nearby maid about the heating tools used in the servants' quarters. He learns they rely on primitive firewood because the staff lacks the magical capacity to power standard artifacts. In response, he drafts a revolutionary magic circle that enhances firewood efficiency by absorbing ambient mana. This allows the wood to burn twice as long without requiring a single drop of magical energy from the user. His tutor is floored by his genius, suggesting he specialize in enchantment to change the world, but Salim hesitates. He knows a noble of his rank is expected to be a frontline warrior, prioritizing the slaughter of magical beasts above all else. He reflects on the rigid expectations of his bloodline, where a duke's son is measured solely by combat prowess. He decides that tool development must remain a mere hobby, as he needs raw power to survive the coming war. While his tutor marvels at the elegance of his formula, Salim privately curses his poor compatibility with the seeker system, though he still resolves to send his blueprints to a master craftsman. As he makes his decision, a system notification flashes before his eyes, showing a massive surge in experience points that leaves him absolutely speechless. This unexpected boost fuels his determination. He vows to follow the seeker system's path, complete his quests, and rewrite his tragic history to secure a happy ending for the kingdom. Young Salim Bergman awakens in his bed with a single tear tracing a path down his cheek, the weight of his situation settling in as he confirms that 6 days have truly passed since his return to the past. His mind drifts back to the dark future he escaped. Though he is only 14 now, he carries the memories of a life that ended at 17 when he became a demon and was slain by the hero. After his demise, his soul was relentlessly devoured by demons while he watched his kingdom crumble for a decade. Every agonizing detail was seared into his mind, even as his spirit teetered on the brink of shattering. He concludes this bizarre fate is tied to the mysterious seeker system, now manifesting before him. It demands he steel his heart and resist demonic temptation, though its true nature remains shrouded in mystery. Determined to avert his tragic future, he follows the system's lead. While donating to the church and gifting the maid proved useless, his contributions to the local orphanage finally yielded a positive response. For several days, he continues his charitable work at the orphanage, all while the elven swordswoman, Katya, keeps a watchful eye over him. He soon realizes the system doesn't reward mindless greed. Once the orphanage was funded, gold donations no longer counted. However, gifting magical tools he crafted himself still earned him favor. His routine is broken when Katya arrives with a formal document, informing Salim-sama that his field training begins today. She'll be supervising him on a monster-slaying expedition. Accepting the task, he steps into the courtyard to find a group of armed warriors waiting. With Katya at his side, he scans the crowd, planning to seek out villagers in need of aid. As he ponders his mission, the entire party turns toward him, their faces lit with excitement as they shout a unified, "Good morning, Salim-sama!" He returns the greeting, urging them to give their all during today's training. He reminds them that they must work hard if they want to pass next year's prestigious academy entrance exam together. Amidst the prep, a young noble named Gilbert complains to his friend Valerie about their weak targets. Valerie sighs, explaining that for nobles, the true test isn't just killing goblins, but the entire process of the expedition. Valerie warns that next year's exam will be brutal, as many nobles are delaying enrollment to match the crown princess's year. Gilbert scoffs, claiming it's a privilege just to be in the same class as Salim. Salim knows this all too well. He plans to enroll alongside the princess, a royal whose legendary combat skills are said to rival the first king himself. The pressure is mounting. Valerie Meldars is anxious about the physical exam, while the young Viscount Gilbert Benson is dreading the written portion. As their wagon rattles along, Salim observes his future inner circle. He recalls his past life's failures, how he was humiliated in combat by a commoner hero and outshone in leadership by a marquise's daughter. He remembers the hollow respect of his retainers and the exasperated sighs they hid behind his back. In his previous life, that alienation turned into rage, driving a wedge between him and his allies. Shaking off the past, he focuses on building camaraderie for the battles ahead. He needs to play this smart according to the system, but his focus is broken by Gilbert's whining about encountering more kobolds. Valerie tells him to shut it, explaining that monsters thrive in mana-rich, uninhabited lands. It's a constant territorial struggle between humanity and the creatures born from raw mana. Gilbert remains bored, claiming kobolds are beneath Salim's notice. Suddenly, the wagon halts as 3 kobolds block their path. Calmly, Salim orders a panicked Gilbert to handle them himself to gain experience. Salim is testing the system's limits. While ordering someone to break branches caused a point deduction, ordering Gilbert to fight seems fine. Since Gilbert has no doubts about the battle, Salim's progress remains intact. His mind remains sharp and analytical. He still doesn't fully understand the system's logic, but he suspects that taking a life personally might be a demerit he'd be better off avoiding. Just then, Gilbert's voice cut through his thoughts, complaining that even kobolds were becoming a nuisance. Ignoring the whining, Salim addressed his retainers with a new command. For the next encounter, the 6 of them would handle the fighting alone. The order was met with a collective gasp of shock. As they moved forward, a new threat emerged from the rustling bushes: hornwolves. Valerie noted they were far tougher than kobolds, but Salim remained composed. Imbuing his voice with a calming power, he commanded them to stay focused, promising he was watching over them. His followers stared back in pure awe. Bolstered by his words, the retainers charged into the fray. The forest clearing soon echoed with the clang of steel and the snarls of beasts as the 6 young warriors engaged the pack of horn wolves in a chaotic melee. After their swift victory, a grinning Gilbert approached Salim, praising the incredible support he had provided. Salim noted internally that using magic to buff others didn't seem to trigger any system reactions, confirming his suspicions about how experience was distributed. He looked upon his victorious retainers as they gathered around him. With the initial test complete, he decided on his next course of action. It was finally time to see what would happen if he engaged in direct combat himself. Their training eventually brought them to a nearby village, where they were greeted by an elderly woman serving as the village chief. She expressed her deep gratitude for Lord Salim's presence, and he formally accepted her welcome, prepared for their stay. Inside, the chief began her report, informing Salim of a goblin settlement discovered to the west. The threat was severe. The group was led by a hobgoblin and included several magic users. She gestured to a knight in full plate, explaining that while he was capable, the village was simply outmatched by this new horde. The knight confirmed that requesting reinforcements was the right call, admitting he couldn't have handled the threat alone. When the chief credited the efficient response to Salim's father, Salim felt a swell of pride, realizing the ducal administration was functioning perfectly. While Salim considered his daily quests, Gilbert was busy devouring sweets. Salim offered him another, but Valerie quickly intervened, scolding Gilbert for spoiling his dinner. Gilbert merely retorted, questioning if she was underestimating his legendary appetite. Turning his attention back to the task at hand, Salim moved to inspect a broken magical stove. Under the watchful eyes of the village women, he examined the device's inner workings, noting the faded runes on its enchantment plates. He found a genuine challenge in the repair, and after a few quick adjustments, he announced that the stove was back in working order. The moment the repair was finished, a system notification appeared. He had completed his daily quests, leveled up to 45, and gained experience for fixing the tool. The village chief was astonished, confused as to why a high-ranking lord would eagerly volunteer for such a task. He simply smiled, explaining that he had a deep interest in enchantment magic and appreciated fine craftsmanship. His humility moved the women to tears, and they promised to pour their souls into preparing a feast as a show of gratitude. With the repairs done and his daily quest cleared, Salim reflected that asking the village chief for extra chores had been a brilliant move for his progression. However, his work wasn't finished. He walked the village perimeter, observing the damaged defensive barriers. Though the villagers could have repaired the earth and magic walls over time, he decided to fix them himself while he was there. In a sudden flash of light, he unleashed his mana, restoring the village's defense barrier in an instant. The system immediately awarded him another 100 experience points for the deed. He paused to reflect on his past. It seemed strange now that he once had to desperately search the castle for good deeds to perform. He realized that simply helping people with their daily struggles was the true meaning of doing good. The village chief approached, amazed to see the wall already repaired so early in the morning. Salim explained that he wanted to finish the work before the hunt, stating that such repairs were merely the duty of a lord protecting his people. He stood by as the chief expressed her pride in being one of his subjects. As she prayed for his success on the hunt, Salim internally dismissed the sentiment, his thoughts focused entirely on the massive experience points he was about to harvest from the goblins. Upon reaching the camp, Salim surveyed the enemy forces, 1 hobgoblin leader, 2 mages, and 30 grunts. He devised a strategy on the spot, ordering the candidates to clear the fringes while Gilbert charged the center. Finally, he declared that he would take down the boss himself. With the plan set, he activates a body boost spell and dashes directly toward the hobgoblin. When a goblin archer takes aim from the cliffs, he instantly casts freeze to neutralize the threat, then follows up with an ice bullet to eliminate another. A notification appears, confirming the kill but also informing him of a 100-point experience deduction, much to his irritation. Gritting his teeth against the frustration of the point penalty, he carves a path through the lesser goblins, his eyes set firmly on his primary target. His sudden assault catches the two goblin mages by surprise as they hastily erect a barrier. He scoffs, declaring it's time for payback, and shatters their defense with a single ice bullet, eliminating both spellcasters. Two more notifications appear, each confirming a kill and another 100-point deduction. He presses the attack, spotting a goblin with its back exposed and felling it instantly with another ice bullet. This time, however, the system announces a staggering 1,000-point reduction in experience. The massive penalty brings him to a dead halt as he stares in shock at the 1,000-point loss. From nearby, Valerie observes that the in-combat status seems to have vanished, making the kill count as a simple monster takedown. Salim realizes that while previous kills were only 100-point penalties, he might have accidentally finished off a monster that was trying to flee. The realization finally dawns on him. To confirm his new theory, he casts freeze on another approaching goblin, completely immobilizing it. Armed with this new understanding, he shifts his tactics. He turns to his comrades, praising their efforts before casting a wide-range freeze spell to incapacitate a whole group of goblins for them. Seeing the helpless targets, Gilbert bellows for the monsters not to run away. His strategic shift earns immediate reactions. Valerie rallies the others, shouting that Salim has left them prey and they shouldn't let him down, while Gilbert cheers him on as an exemplary commander. Katya, however, offers a more critical assessment, noting that while Salim's casting speed is a remarkable talent, he must make better use of the sword skills she's been teaching him. He reflects on his own power, acknowledging that with his magic, he could freeze the entire horde in an instant. Even in his memories of the future, he felt he surpassed the hero in casting speed and sheer volume of spells. However, he consciously chose the sword this time, as annihilating them with magic would cause a massive experience deduction. Hadya observes him, correctly surmising that he is deliberately avoiding fighting alone to focus on training his subordinates. Impressed by his foresight, she listens as he confirms her assessment. From now on, he will have them do the fighting while he provides support from the rear. Putting his new strategy into practice, he gestures forward with a flourish of magic and shouts encouragement to his party. He urges them on, challenging them to show him they have what it takes to bring the goblins down. After the battle, the party gathers before him, reporting that their movements have improved and pledging their full support. He expresses his hope that they will continue to stand by him when they reach the royal capital the following year. Gilbert and the others are flushed with excitement, despite the fact that Salim barely moved and left the heavy lifting to them. Gilbert wonders to himself if they've secretly become a group of battle junkies. Later, while speaking with the village chief, Salim explains his recent discovery. Slaying living beings, even harmful monsters, goes against the philosophy of a seeker and results in experience deductions. As long as he continues leveling as a seeker, he can no longer rely on martial strength alone. He resigns himself to the fact that the system's judgment of good and evil is based on its own rigid values. Realizing they have no choice but to accept it, he decides it's better to adapt his perspective rather than let the frustration consume him. This new understanding highlights the vital importance of daily village life. It seems that to fulfill the goal of doing one good deed a day, one must become deeply involved in the lives of the people. Back at the family estate, Mari the maid informs him that his father has returned home. Salim is taken aback. With his pre-enrollment schedule packed with study plans, he has no time to spare. Yet Mari simply responds with a cheerful smile. He realizes that his father, Duke Bergman, is rarely at the castle due to constant inspections and expeditions. If he wants to speak with him, it has to be now. A thought immediately met by his father's booming voice, questioning why Salim wants to shorten his tutoring time. Salim defiantly explains his desire for the time to think for himself rather than blindly following tutors, dismissing their lessons as foolish and superficial. The Duke's response is cold and sharp, telling the insolent child to know his place and do as he is told. In response to this defiance, his father retaliates not with words, but with magic. As a fireball streaks toward him, Salim panics at the thought of the priceless furniture being destroyed. Unable to let such masterpieces be ruined, he reacts instantly, casting an ice wall to protect the room. The Duke watched, visibly impressed. He recognized the Bergman barrier, a complex composite magic developed by their family over generations. To activate it so swiftly was a feat Selim shouldn't have mastered at 14. But the Duke realized this was the fruit of the desperate training Selim had already endured in his past life. Selim, meanwhile, pleaded with his father to take the fight outside, jokingly claiming the furniture was more valuable than their lives. The Duke ignored the jab, noting that his son wasn't all talk after all. As he prepared to strike again, a system notification flashed. Selim's flippant attitude had just cost him 100 experience points. He cursed inwardly, arguing it was just a figure of speech, but the system remained unforgiving. Another notification chimed, deducting an additional 50 experience points for his poor attitude. Forcing himself to stay calm, Selim wiped the sweat from his brow and resolved to protect the decor from his father's reckless onslaught. Across the room, the Duke's blade erupted in flames as he challenged his son to manifest the Bergman barrier once more. The sight of his father ignited a grim memory. In the future, Selim remembered this man wasn't a villain. He died a hero defending his people. It was actually Selim who had succumbed to temptation and ascended as the demon lord his father died fighting. Snapping back to the present, Selim sighed at the complexity of human nature. With a focused breath, he summoned a massive ice wall just as his father lunged forward with a devastating strike. The effort was grueling. Selim felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him, realizing that while he had the knowledge of a master, his 14-year-old body lacked the mana to sustain such advanced spells. The Duke noticed the struggle, silently admiring how thoroughly his son had calculated every move. His stern evaluation broke into a booming laugh. The Duke praised Selim for skillfully protecting the nearby documents, noting that while the boy inherited his mother Erica's looks and personality, his voice was the only thing he got from his old man. With the test concluded, he turned and left. Selim let out a long sigh of relief, a knowing smile playing on his lips. He was glad his father was the type to be swayed by a show of strength. With that hurdle cleared, he finally had time to level up, deciding to head into town tomorrow to interact with the commoners while his strict mother was away. Walking through the bustling city streets, Selim moved with a confident stride, enjoying his secret excursion. He was certain his commoner disguise, plain clothes and no guards, was the perfect way to blend into the crowd. He congratulated himself on the success of his stealth mission, having strictly ordered Maid Marie to bar anyone from entering his room to ensure his disappearance went unnoticed. A translucent screen flickered into view, presenting a daily quest: perform one good deed. As the Duke's heir, his freedom was limited, but he needed these interactions to survive. He remembered his past life, succumbing to darkness at 17, and spending a decade as a wandering soul watching his kingdom fall. Now, back in his younger body, he was determined to follow the system's orders and avoid that horrific fate. Resolute, he understood that his only salvation lay in the system's guidance. Spotting an elderly woman struggling with a heavy water bucket, he saw his chance. However, his sudden approach only startled the woman, who looked at him with suspicion. After he successfully carried the load, a notification confirmed the quest's completion, rewarding him with a massive XP boost. He realized that helping the common folk was indeed the key to growth. However, the woman quickly sized him up and, seeing he was idle, suggested he might as well clean her house too. Before he could object, she thrust a duster into his hand. When she saw his blank expression, she realized he had no idea what it was, muttering about what kind of sheltered life the boy must have led. Selim took the unfamiliar tool and examined it with the intensity of a scholar. After a moment of deduction, he concluded that the soft cloth was meant for gently wiping away dust. Armed with this half-baked understanding, he began attacking the dust with vigorous, violent swings, immediately filling the small room with thick, choking clouds of debris. The woman began coughing violently, shouting for him to be gentle before pointing out the dust caked on the high rafters. Recognizing the problem, Selim announced his intention to borrow a nearby desk to reach them. But instead of using the desk as a stool, he began meticulously polishing the surface of the desk itself. The woman watched in utter bewilderment, wondering what on earth was wrong with this boy. When he addressed the woman informally while asking for a container, she snapped back, correcting him that her name was Amanda, and he should watch his tone. Despite her irritation, she sighed and handed him a small pot to continue his work. With a flourish, he reveals his magically enhanced cleaning tool, which has gathered all the dust into a neat pile. Amanda, however, looks thoroughly unimpressed by the flashy display. As the dust neatly deposits itself into a container, Amanda is suddenly astonished, asking if he's some kind of master craftsman. He casually dismisses it as a hobby, but she's already convinced and insists he follow her. They burst into a nearby shop where an old man named Johann greets Amanda warmly. He curiously eyes the handsome young man she's brought along, wondering who this new guest could be. Skipping any preamble, Amanda points to a large, rusted metal box and demands that Salim fix it. He stares at the dilapidated device, completely bewildered by the sudden command. After inspecting the machine, Salim admits he knows little of its internal mechanics, but quickly identifies the core issue. The magical inscription has simply faded, and he determines that vibrating his mana should restore it. The device hums back to life, prompting a joyous shout from Amanda. Johann is deeply grateful, as they couldn't afford a replacement, and Salim earns a level up for his successful repair. With her excitement boiling over, Amanda declares that this calls for a celebration. She decides to throw a massive karaoke party and immediately begins rallying the neighbors for the festivities. Salim is baffled by the word karaoke, but as the shop fills with cheerful elders, he gains a massive 500 EXP bonus for restoring their joy. He can only watch in confusion at their strange customs. Later, Amanda confronts Salim at her home, questioning if he's just a bored rich man with a strange hobby. He denies it, stating plainly that his goal is simply to level up. He explains his mission to perform one good deed a day, but Amanda remains skeptical of his leveling talk. She warns him that today's task might be too grueling for a pampered young master. Amanda leads him to a registration table where a woman questions why she brought such a handsome boy along. Amanda firmly declares that Salim will be taking her place in today's activities. Her answer is a booming, blunt declaration: gutter cleaning. Salim considers the task. Since Amanda lives alone, this community cleanup is a difficult obligation for her. He recognizes it as a perfect opportunity to help the town and fulfill his daily quest. Deciding to finish the job efficiently, he invokes his earth magic. A powerful clay wave erupts from the ground, instantly vacuuming all the sludge and filth from the gutters in one massive motion. The onlookers stand frozen as Salim levitates an enormous sphere of collected waste. He calmly turns to the registration woman and asks where he should dispose of the mountain of filth. With a simple nod, he clears the waste away. A notification confirms his success, granting him 100 EXP for the cleanup and a 500 EXP bonus for completing his daily quest. He returns to Amanda to present her with the participation prize. She is astonished to see his clothes are perfectly spotless, unaware that he used a mana barrier to keep the grime at bay. Amanda sighs and offers him a cookie from the prize bag, insisting he earned it. He flatly refuses the gesture, stating he isn't starving and that his business here is concluded. His dismissive attitude finally breaks Amanda's patience. Crushing the cookie in her fist, she erupts in anger, screaming at the ungrateful brat for his lack of manners. Stunned by her sudden fury, Salim realizes he still doesn't understand the etiquette of commoners. Amanda continues her tirade, demanding he learn how to accept a simple gift with a smile. Amanda continued her lecture, explaining that when someone offers kindness, you simply accept it and say thank you. Taking her advice to heart, Salim hesitantly bit into the cookie, finding it surprisingly delicious. As he chewed, a new realization dawned on him. Gratitude was a powerful tool. He wondered if this was some secret technique or a clever trick to building rapport with commoners. This insight changed his perspective on his recent chores. While Amanda usually just barked orders, his work on the villagers' roofs had been steadily earning him experience points. He realized that despite her gruff exterior, Amanda was a respected pillar of the community. By the start of the new year, 15-year-old Salim had become the town's de facto handyman. After finishing another task at Amanda's, a flurry of notifications appeared. He had completed his daily good deed and miraculously leaped from level -1 straight to level 2. He let out a triumphant shout, ecstatic to finally escape the negative levels. However, his celebration was short-lived as Amanda's sharp voice rang out from nearby, telling him to keep the noise down. Despite her tone, she offered him an apple to celebrate his progress. He accepted with a genuine thank you, prompting Amanda to remark that he finally seemed present. As he bit into the fruit, a blissful expression washed over his face. It tasted like heaven. While eating, he analyzed his sudden growth. He had jumped from level -1 to 2, skipping level 1 entirely. It seemed the leveling threshold had shifted, and while progress was easy now, he knew the grind would only get tougher from here. He then spotted a new notification. He'd acquired a minor healing skill. He considered testing it on himself, but his innate magic was so powerful it would close any wound instantly. When he asked Amanda for a test subject, she initially scoffed at the rarity of healers, but then paused, realizing that with him, anything was possible. Before he could explain, Amanda took action. With a swift, deliberate motion, she sliced her own palm with a knife. Salim watched in horror as she calmly presented the bleeding scratch, leaving him stammering and guilt-ridden over her self-inflicted injury. He stared at her hand, perplexed. While his natural magic felt intuitive, this system-granted healing skill felt completely alien. As Amanda urged him to hurry, he realized he had no idea how to even trigger the ability. Suddenly, a translucent screen appeared, asking if he'd like to heal the detected wound. Realizing the system handled the process automatically, he mentally selected yes. In an instant, the gash on Amanda's hand sealed perfectly, much to her calm satisfaction. To his disappointment, his experience points didn't budge. He surmised that healing intentional wounds didn't count toward his progress. Amanda suggested they find someone with natural injuries, leading him toward a nearby lot where local children were always covered in scrapes. Walking there, he checked his status. Salim Bergman, Level 2 Seeker, with 90 out of 300 EXP. He noticed new entries for MP and healing proficiency, but since the system's descriptions were vague, he vowed to investigate the numbers later. Just then, Amanda announced they had arrived. They found a rowdy group of kids, one of whom immediately teased Amanda about her handsome young companion. This earned the child a sharp rebuke from a nearby elder, who bellowed at them for being so disrespectful. Salim's attention shifted to a small boy who had just scraped his knee. The system prompt flashed instantly, detecting the wound. As Salim approached to help, the other children stared suspiciously, with one even whispering that he looked creepy. He accepted the prompt, and the boy's injury vanished instantly. Astonished that the pain was gone, the child looked up in awe as a notification confirmed a 100-point EXP gain. The boy then beamed, calling Salim a handsome big brother and asking for his name. The question made Salim realize that in 2 months, Amanda had never once asked his name. She dryly noted that proper etiquette requires introducing oneself first, something he'd failed to do. The child chimed in, suggesting that being nameless was a hassle and he should just pick a cool alias. A sudden spark of inspiration hit him. With newfound confidence, he pointed to himself and declared his new identity. "I'll go by Ganby." With his new alias established, Ganby invited all the injured children to step forward. They flocked to him eagerly, and with every heal, he racked up 100 EXP. His level skyrocketed from 2 to 4 in minutes, while Amanda watched from the sidelines before deciding it was time to head home. His hard work was paying off. A quick status check revealed he was now a level 4 seeker. His MP sat at 920 out of a staggering 7,691, and his healing proficiency had already climbed to an impressive 97. Lying in bed, he finally had a moment to reflect. He now understood that MP was simply a numerical value for his mana pool, with the system automating his skill activation. However, using these abilities consumed power just like any other magic. It was only through treating the children that he finally unlocked these skills and grasped their true utility. But this new understanding only raised more questions. He wondered if his current MP represented his maximum potential or just a starting point. Without a frame of reference, he had no way of knowing if his mana capacity was considered impressive or pathetic. His thoughts then turned to the practical application of his power. While healing his own minor wounds cost a negligible amount of mana, healing others was incredibly inefficient. He recalled with frustration how quickly his MP drained after treating the light injuries of only 10 people. A startling realization surfaced. If healing minor scratches on a small group consumed half his mana, the skill was fundamentally impractical for serious combat. This sudden epiphany made him jolt in bed before exhaustion finally claimed him, and he drifted off into a deep sleep. Even in his dreams, his mind raced with possibilities. He considered the worst-case scenarios, but resolved to find the answers himself. A new theory formed. Perhaps the proficiency stat was the key. If he could level it up, his magical efficiency might improve. With a final moment of clarity, he saw his path forward. The real test would begin tomorrow. Salim Bergman, known to the local children by his alias Gani, returned to check on his patients. The children cheerfully informed him that he had already cured everyone the day before. Now a level 5 seeker with high healing proficiency, his recent efforts were clearly paying off. He was taken aback, admitting he had only come to test his skills. Seeing his troubled expression, the children wondered if he was just a nice guy looking for more people to save. One of them suggested he check out the other hangout spots in the district. When Salim looked confused, the children explained the complex web of territories among the commoner kids. While they couldn't cross into another group's turf, Gani was an outsider and could go wherever he pleased. The revelation of such a rigid social structure among the poor surprised him. As he continued his work, each act of healing brought a tangible reward, granting him the experience points needed to push further along his path. Later that evening, he reflected on his progress. After healing 10 more children, he noticed his mana consumption becoming more efficient as his proficiency grew. He resolved to stay focused, hoping to unlock even more advanced restoration tiers. This routine continued for several days. As he made his rounds and steadily approached level 10, he was suddenly confronted by a hooded figure who demanded to know if he was the one unlawfully healing people in the area. These figures were from the church. The children whispered that the church only ever helped the wealthy, and the lead woman confirmed their greed, declaring that healing was a sacred art belonging solely to them. She claimed he was encroaching on their business and offered a choice: join them and receive a proper baptism, or face the consequences. His response was immediate and absolute: "I refuse." Internally, he scoffed at joining an organization that likely taxed its members' experience points for simple donations. The church women were aghast at his disrespect, questioning if he understood the authority he was defying. Salim couldn't reveal his true identity as the eldest son of a ducal house while in disguise. Instead, with his eyes glowing with intensity, he raised a hand and manifested a complex magical seal, issuing a single, chilling command: "Begone." The sudden surge of raw power stunned the women. A freezing chill filled the air as they felt the overwhelming magical pressure emanating from him. One stammered that this wasn't the right place for a fight, their bravado completely shattering as they scrambled away. After the display of power, Salim watched as the children erupted in cheers. One exclaimed how awesome he was, while another marveled at how safe they felt. Relieved, Salim caught his breath, hoping his sudden use of high-tier magic hadn't actually frightened them. The following day, he was once again surrounded by the children, a rare sense of ease settling over his usually stressful life. That calm was shattered when several figures in dark robes cornered him in a secluded alley. One of them stepped forward, identifying themselves as church agents and ordering him to come quietly. Salim immediately realized the situation had escalated. Between the choice of a back alley away from prying eyes and their all-black tactical attire, it was clear these weren't priests. They were a cleanup crew. Their attempt to hide their identities told him everything he needed to know about their intentions. He decided that if they discovered his secret, he had to ensure they wouldn't live to spread the word. With a swift motion, he cast a spell, shouting, "Ice wall barrier!" As the agents recoiled, Salim confronted them, asking if they were truly prepared to take responsibility for attacking a member of the Bergman family. The agents retreat, one of them recognizing the young master's face. Salim watches them flee, relieved a simple threat worked. as a real fight would have cost him precious experience points. It's clear now, the church is obsessed with monopolizing every healing mage. Later, while treating another child, a notification pings. He's gained 100 XP, hitting level 10 and unlocking a new skill. The child's gratitude startles him, but he's too pleased with his progress to care, deciding to check the details later. Back in his room, he analyzes the new skill. It only restores stamina rather than curing disease, making its utility limited. Still, he resolves to follow the system's lead, leveling up to avoid the dark future that haunts his memories. Suddenly, Amanda appears, having overheard him. She's amazed he can heal, though he clarifies he can only restore stamina. She quickly realizes that in their world, even a boost in stamina can be a lifesaver. Selim then heads to Grandpa Johan's shop, where the old man recognizes Amanda as the genius who fixed his tools. Johan is clearly anxious, glancing toward the back room where his granddaughter is resting. Selim enters the back room to find Zafi bedridden and frail. Amanda shushes them, explaining the girl hasn't been able to leave her bed for days. As Zafi apologizes for her weakness, the system offers Selim a prompt to assist with her recovery. He accepts, and a soft glow fills the room. To everyone's shock, Zafi sits up, feeling an immediate rush of energy. Johan asks if she's cured, but Selim explains it's only a temporary boost, though the XP he gains is very real. Over a drink, Johan explains the grim reality of the Grelna disease. It's a plague that preys on the poor who lack magical resistance. He reveals Zafi's tragic past, cast out by her husband after falling ill, with no one left but her grandfather. He describes the illness as a slow, cruel death sentence. For commoners, magical power is their only shield, and they have almost none. Desperate, Johan begs Selim to keep using his magic to ease Zafi's suffering. The shopkeeper's voice breaks as he offers to sell his entire shop just to pay for the treatment. He cries out that Zafi is the only joy they have left in this world. Selim calmly declines the money, explaining that the experience he gains from healing is more than enough. He offers a gentle smile, stating that a man's happiness is worth more than gold, leaving Johan overwhelmed with gratitude. A month of treatment passes, and Zafi is now outside energetically shoveling snow. Amanda is stunned by the girl's vitality, and Zafi beams, admitting she barely feels sick anymore thanks to Selim's help. Selim explains to Amanda that while he isn't curing her, boosting her stamina allows her natural immune system to fight back. He notes that nobles rarely die from this because of their high magic, a logic that Amanda finds sound. Suddenly, a game-changing notification appears. The illness is completely cured, and Selim is awarded a massive 1000 XP. At that same moment, Zafi pumps her fist, jokingly wondering if she's finally beaten the disease. It's no joke. Selim confirms through his interface that she is officially cured. Zafi is speechless, tears welling up in her eyes as the miracle sinks in, while Amanda cries out in pure shock from the doorway. Overjoyed, Amanda rushes off to tell Johan the news. She later explains to Selim that the shop has become a sanctuary for other families suffering from the same plague, and Selim listens with a focused, thoughtful expression. He addresses the gathered families, being honest about his limits. He provides stamina, but their recovery depends on their own strength. The group leader nods in understanding, and they prepare to visit the sickest neighbors first. As they walk, Amanda admits she hesitated to tell the others until she was sure it worked. She believes that even a sliver of hope is worth everything to those who have nothing left. Selim gets to work, moving from bed to bed as waves of healing energy and XP flow into him. The families watch with bated breath, and after the third patient, Selim feels a surge of power as he levels up and unlocks a new ability. He checks the new skill: Cure Disease via Immunity. The name alone is promising, and with 3 patients left and his mana running low, he decides to gamble everything on testing it on the next person. He continued to bolster the stamina of the next 2 patients, gaining more experience with every passing second. The description of his new skill lingered in his mind. It would cause a patient's condition to rapidly fluctuate while aggressively consuming their stamina. The wording was ominous, yet he found it hard to believe the system would grant him a skill that was entirely useless. After treating the final patient, a young woman named Laura, The results were instantaneous. She sat up in bed, her hands clasped together as a sudden surge of energy coursed through her. To the astonishment of her family, she declared that it felt like a total miracle. Her father rushed to her side, overwhelmed with joy. As Laura suggested getting some tea, Salim quickly cautioned her not to overexert herself, reminding her that restored stamina didn't mean she was fully healed. Internally, he noted his remaining mana and realized he could finally test his new skill, announcing that he had a suggestion. He told them there might be a way to eradicate her illness all at once. The words hung heavily in the air, met with a stunned, breathless silence from both the father and daughter. Johann immediately questioned why he hadn't mentioned this when treating Zafi. Salim explained that he had only just unlocked the ability through the repeated use of his other powers. He then delivered a grave warning. The method would cause violent internal changes and drain her stamina rapidly. With a grim expression, he concluded that it would be incredibly painful. He apologized for the suddenness of the offer, promising to return tomorrow to support her stamina instead. However, Laura remained resolute. Pushing through her agony, she declared her desperate desire to be healed immediately, no matter the cost. Through her tears, she explained that the illness had been a torment from the very beginning. More than the physical pain, she refused to remain a burden on her husband. Her husband tried to comfort her, gently suggesting they could take their time with the recovery. Despite the words of comfort, the man asked Salim if there truly was a faster way to heal her, even if it meant more pain. Laura added her own desperate plea, and a confirmation flashed through Salim's mind. The disease was curable via immune manipulation. Seeing their unwavering resolve, he agreed to proceed. As he began the process, Laura cried out in agony as a flood of information overwhelmed Salim's senses. Her stamina was being devoured by an intense immune response, causing collateral damage to her body. The system automatically fused his stamina support and healing skills, issuing a directive not to move more than 10 meters away from her. The sudden crisis threw the room into a panic. Her husband cried out in fear, asking if she would be all right, while the elderly Amanda noted the girl's spiking fever and rushed to get cooling supplies. Salim could only watch the treatment unfold, a silent prayer resting on his lips. He gritted his teeth, gripped by self-reproach. He admitted to himself that he had been too eager to test this skill, and now feared he had trusted this unknown system too much. The thought that it could be a demonic creation surfaced, yet he recalled how it always urged him toward good deeds. He resolved to resist temptation and change the future, even if it meant simply following the system's instructions for now. His internal struggle was interrupted by Laura's husband, who pointed out how late it had become, worrying that Salim's absence from the castle would soon be noticed. However, Salim knew he couldn't abandon her while her life hung in the balance. He remained by the bedside, gripped by a profound anxiety he hadn't felt since his ordeal with the demon. Clenching his fist, he whispered Laura's name. Her husband noticed his turmoil, but Salim was powerless to intervene. The healing process was now entirely managed by the system, leaving him as a mere spectator. The tense night finally gave way to morning. Suddenly, Laura sat bolt upright, apologizing for keeping everyone awake and cheerfully offering to make breakfast. The abrupt recovery stunned the onlookers, and her husband cried out her name, desperate to know if she was truly all right. As she spoke, a final notification confirmed the success. The illness was completely cured, and he had gained 1,000 experience points. He observed her healthy glow, and Laura confirmed it, stating that aside from a little sluggishness, she felt absolutely wonderful. He turned to leave, but Laura's father rushed forward, apologizing profusely for ever doubting him. The man tried to press a bag of money into his hands, funds they had saved for the church, but Salim refused it, stating he had more than enough. With the treatment concluded, he prepared to head back, expressing only a quiet relief that the girl was cured. Tears streaming down his face, the grateful father thanked him again for saving Laura and insisted that if Salim ever needed anything, he would do whatever he could to help. Salim internally reflected that he had no use for a commoner's aid, but looking at the man's earnest face, he reconsidered and told him he would let him know if a need arose. His decision was guided by a memory of a man's advice. If someone offers to help, just accept it. Following that wisdom felt right. With a small, genuine smile, he formally accepted the pledge. "All right," he said. "If I ever need anything, I'll ask." The father was overcome with gratitude, and in that moment of connection, Salim felt his own heart begin to grow. Salim's eyes fluttered open to the sight of his maid, Mari, who was weeping with relief. She called out his name, thankful that he had finally woken up. Groggy and disoriented, he recognized her and realized it was already morning. The awakening brought back memories of the previous day's confrontation. His father, Duke Bergman, had roared at him, demanding to know where he had been and accusing him of lacking the awareness befitting the heir to a ducal house. Salim could only stammer in response that he was simply helping people in the city. The memory of his father's fury is jarring, but his physical state is even worse. He bolts upright in shock, realizing he spent the entire night using his skills to maintain an ice wall. With his mana reserves completely bone dry, he realizes he passed out from the sheer exhaustion of enduring his father's relentless assault. He sinks back into the pillows, turning his attention to Mari. When he asks if he caused her any trouble, she quickly reassures him that he's fine. She insists that caring for him is her duty, and pleads with him not to bow to someone of her lowly station. This gentle reassurance sparks a moment of introspection. As the heir to the dukedom, he realizes he can't keep sneaking around. If his reckless actions cause trouble, people like Mari will be the ones forced to pay the price for his mistakes. This newfound resolve is immediately put to the test on the training grounds. His father confronts him, noting he's finally awake before coldly stating that Salim only survived because he was forgiven. To earn back his father's trust, Salim must now prove his worth in a trial of strength. There's no time for a response. With a roar to begin the match, the Duke lunges forward, closing the distance in a terrifying instant. The sudden assault forces Salim to rely on pure instinct as he frantically dodges. He recognizes his father is using physical enhancement magic and knows he must keep evading. A direct confrontation would drain his remaining mana instantly. The Duke bellows at him to stop running and fight, punctuating the demand by conjuring a massive fireball. Salim watches the projectile hurtle toward him. He's confident he can dodge it, but a horrifying thought strikes him. There are servants inside the castle. To protect them, he erects an ice wall, straining against the impact as his mana hits rock bottom. He realizes his depleted reserves are no match for his father's overwhelming power. Despite his dwindling mana, the barrier holds firm, a feat that does not go unnoticed. The Duke smirks, remarking that the defense wasn't bad at all. He warns Salim not to hold back, as one wrong move could have been a disaster. Then, to the boy's astonishment, his father offers a rare compliment. "You've grown strong, Salim." The Duke reveals that a messenger from the church had visited weeks ago, interested in taking Salim in due to his talent for healing magic. He explains that he refused their rude offers, and when Salim vanished for 2 nights, he suspected the boy had run to them. Salim is taken aback, wondering why the church would dare approach the heir of a great house. His father asks directly if he can truly use healing magic, admitting he was on the verge of burning down the front door. Flustered, Salim clarifies that he can heal minor wounds, but specifies that he uses a skill, not traditional magic. Internally, he laments the hassle the system causes and curses the church members under his breath. The Duke scoffs, dismissing healing magic as a useless ability for a noble. He accuses Salim of sneaking out merely to satisfy his own ego by curing commoners, calling it pure hypocrisy. Salim reflects that while his father's words are harsh, they represent the common view among nobility who devalue healing because they can simply heal themselves. However, Salim knows his ambition is far greater. His true goal is to accumulate experience by handling as many cases as possible. He believes that with enough practice, his skill could evolve to heal injuries too severe for natural regeneration, a feat that no mage in the entire country can currently accomplish. With determination in his eyes, Salim declares that as the firstborn of a duke's house, he will achieve this impossible goal. His father observes his confidence and tells him to do as he wishes. As the Duke turns to leave, he considers it might be a bluff. But if the system didn't flag the claim as a lie, then perhaps it is truly possible. Now that his tutoring schedule has changed, he can finally go into town openly. Seated at a desk piled with books, Salim resolves to study medicine and pharmacology from the ground up. He recalls treating Laura and realizes that while his healing skill is automatic, relying on it blindly without proper medical knowledge is far too dangerous. This proves harder than anticipated. Medicine is the domain of the church, and finding a teacher is a significant hurdle. He has no connections among high-ranking nobles or apothecaries, and his request for a tutor was flatly refused since he has no intention of ever joining the church. He reasons that commoners are the most susceptible to illness, so he should search the shops where the sick gather. Just then, a loud crash echoes from outside, followed by shouting, and an idea strikes him. He will ask Amanda, the apothecary, to teach him. He finds the elderly woman, who is shocked by his request. She huffs, assuming Johann sent him, and confirms she was an apothecary long ago but is now retired. She questions why he would need her help, pointing out that he cured the Jarella disease, something even she could not treat. Salim explains that while his skills can cure diseases, using them without proper knowledge is reckless. Amanda concedes his point, warning him that pharmacology takes decades of dedication. Realizing that letting someone with his power run loose without guidance would be a problem, she reluctantly agrees to teach him as long as he stays in town. He apologizes for the deception and formally introduces himself as Salim Bergman, the eldest son of the Duke. Amanda sighs, unsurprised, noting that most people had already guessed he was a high-ranking noble due to his immense mana. Since they knew him as Gani, they simply treated him as such, since commoners don't know proper etiquette anyway. Amanda agrees to make their master-apprentice bond official. Salim, however, expresses a preference to continue being treated as Gani, explaining that he finds value in observing how commoners live and grow. Bemused, Amanda simply remarks on what a strange person the Lord's son has turned out to be. With their arrangements finalized, Amanda asks where they should begin. Salim expresses his desire to master medicine, theorizing that curing illness follows the same fundamental principles as physical enhancement. Amanda, having been retired for years, agrees to help him find patients to treat. Later, Salim stands before his assembled followers. An aide reports that 15 of them passed the entrance exam for the Royal First Magic Academy. With these new recruits, his personal retinue now totals 22 members. This news sends Gilbert into a panic. He laments that they are trailing behind the Louvier faction's 24 members, while the Marquis Sarmiento holds 16. He is horrified that over half of their candidates failed, and that Valerie didn't even bother to take the exam. Salim calmly reassures his followers, telling them not to focus on the numbers and praising those who passed. Internally, he notes that the Louvier family's military discipline likely prepared them for the grueling exams. He knows that such small cracks in morale are exactly what demons look to exploit. Turning his attention to Valerie and Gilbert, Salim states that the size of rival noble factions no longer concerns him. He asks for their direct support, revealing that he has successfully developed the ability to heal the sick. He tasks Valerie with gathering intelligence on the capital's sick, intending to sharpen his healing arts by treating as many patients as possible. Valerie enthusiastically agrees, though she privately wonders about Salim's true motives and resolves to stay cautious. Under Amanda's expert guidance, Salim continues his pharmacology studies with the help of his aides. Gilbert, filled with a renewed sense of purpose, rallies the others to assist their lord. Salim watches them all, his expression unreadable and thoughtful. As their clinical studies begin, they encounter two primary afflictions: Grelna disease, which targets those with weak magic, and Ziran disease, which affects children. Amanda explains that Ziran is known as the Trial of 10, a rite of passage with a tragically high mortality rate. Salim arrives at an orphanage in the grip of a Ziran outbreak. As he kneels by a child's bedside, the director watches in awe. He is stunned that Salim Soma, a noble who had already donated generous funds, is now personally treating the children. Nearby, a healthy young girl watches from the doorway. The girl steps forward, asking if everyone will get better. While the matron worries about her safety, Selim reassures her, explaining that the girl's presence during an outbreak suggests she has immense magic power or strong immunity. He notes that even some nobles carry the disease without ever showing symptoms. Selim turns his focus to the girl, reasoning that if the disease is spreading this quickly, she is likely a carrier. A soft glow emanates from his palm as he directs his magic toward her to assess her internal condition. The girl gasps in surprise, exclaiming that her body suddenly feels incredibly light. Selim's diagnosis is confirmed. As he suspected, the hidden illness had been draining her stamina, even without manifesting outward symptoms. She eagerly asks if this means they can all play together again. Selim smiles, promising her the other children will be better soon. He encourages her to cheer them on to speed up their recovery. Nearby, another bedridden child murmurs how glad he is that he isn't the only one who escaped the pain. Selim is taken aback by the boy's words. He finds it a haunting thing for a child to say, as if the boy felt guilty for being healthy while his friends suffered. The little girl tearfully explains that her best friend is among the sick, and she just wants them to be together again. Understanding her pain, Selim kneels and gently places a hand on her head, promising her that he will make it happen. Later, Selim attends to a young man whose illness resists immune manipulation. While Selim managed to heal a skin irritation, a persistent numbness remains in the man's leg. This specific ailment is beyond his current methods, leaving the patient to cry out in despair. Suddenly, Amanda storms in and silences the room. She force-feeds the protesting young man a spoonful of foul green juice, declaring this is the consequence of a poor diet. As the man gags at the taste, Amanda retorts that she couldn't have him falling ill after she publicly announced their project. As the man admits he's actually feeling better, Amanda explains the situation to Selim. The man had been causing a scene at a tavern, attempting a stunt where he ate nothing but bread rolls for a year. She lectures that a poor diet destabilizes mana, teaching Selim that the world is full of strange, non-magical ailments. Selim is soon faced with another emergency. A distraught woman explains that her husband ignored her warnings and ate monster meat purchased from a shady merchant. She pleads with Selim to save him, describing the situation as dire. Approaching the bed, Selim finds the man unconscious. Amanda explains that while some monster meat is a delicacy, other types cause fatal food poisoning. Seeing the wife's tears, Selim realizes this toxin is beyond his current abilities and looks to Amanda in dismay. Despite the dire situation, Amanda sprang into action, telling Selim that their first priority was stabilizing the man's strength. She administered a specialized antidote for monster meat poisoning, admitting it only offered a slim chance of recovery, but it was their only hope. As the medicine took hold, a notification flashed in Selim's mind. The illness was now treatable. He let out a gasp of shock, realizing his immune manipulation could finally save the man, a sudden reaction that left both Amanda and the man's wife completely bewildered. Following the successful treatment, the grateful couple thanked them profusely. The wife noted that while the medicine was a known antitoxin, it was rarely this effective. Thanks to Selim's intervention, they now had definitive proof of the remedy's true potential. He accepted their gratitude with a smile, realizing he needed to study even harder to master the synergy between medication and his healing arts. Curious, he asked Amanda about the active ingredients used in her potent concoction. Amanda explained that the serum utilized the poison glands of a frog-type monster, a classic example of fighting poison with poison. Since these creatures were native only to the Bergman territory, she offered to teach him the recipe before he departed for the capital. He chuckled, remarking that her vast knowledge made her seem like a wise witch from a storybook. He reflected on how much he had learned from Amanda, noting that his own power level had been steadily rising under her tutelage. That progress was soon quantified. Back in his room, a series of messages congratulated him on reaching level 30 and completing his beginner training. Along with a new utility skill, a new main quest appeared. Reach level 50 to awaken his holy attribute and negate the power of darkness. He reviewed his growing list of rare but niche skills, calculating that he could hit level 50 in 3 months, just as he began his new life at the Royal Capital Academy. His resolve was clear. He needed every ounce of power possible to stand against the coming demons. Later, Salim stood in the estate's grand hall, clutching a bouquet of roses as the entire staff gathered to bid him farewell. The day of his long-awaited departure had finally arrived. Turning to one of the maids, he thanked her for her dedicated care. She wept as she wished the young master well, while the children he had cured of the Grelna disease also chimed in, though Salim humbly dismissed their overwhelming gratitude. Amidst the crowd, a young man named Nagi approached and offered a single poppy. Nagi asked if Salim remembered an old promise and mentioned he had a favor to ask. Without hesitation, Salim agreed to do whatever he could to help. The crowd of well-wishers grew as Amanda and the villagers arrived bearing flowers, calling him Your Highness and praising his selfless devotion. Salim felt they were exaggerating, reflecting on how rare it was to find healers who expected nothing in return. His gaze fell upon a small, wilting flower held out by one of the children. The boy asked if Salim liked the gift he'd picked from Amanda's garden, and Salim felt a pang of guilt, realizing how long the child must have been waiting there just to see him. Deeply moved by their kindness, he gathered the flowers into a massive, vibrant bouquet, treating them as a precious gift. As a system notification signaled his departure, Salim turned to the crowd with a final thanks and announced, "I'm off." At the royal capital's first Academy of Magic, the new year began with immense anticipation. With the crown princess herself enrolling, powerful nobles from across the country sent their children to join her, including Salim Bergman, who stood ready to begin his academic life. As the entrance ceremony concluded, Gilbert expressed his relief, while Valerie wondered about the food at the welcome party. Valerie then noted Salim's strange familiarity with the grounds, to which he confirmed that, while this was his first time here in this life, it was actually his second time enrolling. He carried memories of a dark future where he succumbed to demonic temptation and became a demon lord, only to be slain by the hero. After his soul was devoured for a decade, he suddenly awoke in his 14-year-old body, right before he ever set foot in the academy. This second chance came with a divine directive. A mysterious system tasked him with resisting the demon's influence. Now he follows the system's guidance religiously, leveling up to fortify his spirit and train his heart against the encroaching darkness. His mission to avert that grim fate began a week before the official ceremony. He and his companions arrived early at the massive, luxurious estate of House Bergman within the royal capital. There, Gilbert stood in awe of the mansion's opulence. Salim, however, dismissed the luxury as mere noble pride and urged his companions to make themselves at home, asking for their help in training his healing skills to the limit. Inside the mansion, Valerie introduces Salim to two key contacts, a veteran estate servant and a merchant woman with deep ties to the Duke's household. Their mission is to scout for patients, but Valerie warns that because the church holds such immense power in the capital, Salim's healing practice must be kept strictly to the shadows of night. Despite the need for secrecy, the merchant woman immediately reports an emergency that can't wait. She stammers that they've already found someone in critical condition, begging for help even though it's broad daylight. Without a second thought for the risks, Salim declares they are heading out immediately to diagnose the patient. On the way, Salim realizes the ailment is all too familiar. It's food poisoning from contaminated monster meat, a lethal illness he once treated back home under Amanda's guidance. Knowing these impoverished villagers could never afford the cure, he resolves to bring the necessary medicine to them at once. Their guide leads them through a decaying district where the alleys are too cramped for carriages. Passing crumbling walls and shattered roofs, Salim realizes these slums are far worse than even the poorest parts of his family's territory. He considers using earth magic to repair the buildings, but decides he must conserve every drop of mana for the healing ahead. He steps into a cramped room filled with the agonizing groans of the villagers. Their symptoms are a mirror image of the illness that once nearly took Amanda's life. In his past existence, Salim would have turned a blind eye to such squalor, but now he recognizes that these neglected societal cracks were what paved the way for the demon invasion. There are 7 patients in total. The system confirms that his immune manipulation can cure them, and conveniently, his parallel operation skill allows him to treat exactly 7 people at once. he prepares to activate his simultaneous healing magic, first using medicine to stabilize their agonizing symptoms. Meanwhile, outside the slum house, the blonde princess refuses to abandon her post, insisting that the prince cannot be left unguarded in such a place. Sensing the tension, Salim calls out from inside, telling Katya and Valerie that the procedure will take some time and they should feel free to stretch their legs. Ever the strategist, Salim instructs his steward to rotate the 22 attendants so no one wears themselves out. He reminds them that while Katya's primary duty is his protection, Valerie still has her studies to focus on. Valerie acknowledges the command, and Salim prepares to stay and oversee the intensive recovery. After some time, the treatment is finally complete. As the villagers stir and the pain fades, they confusedly ask who their savior is. Salim introduces himself as the heir to House Bergman and explains that his staff has brought porridge for them. The revelation that a high-ranking noble personally saved them leaves the room in stunned silence. Shock quickly transforms into overwhelming gratitude. They can hardly process that a duke's son would step into the slums for them. As they eat, they marvel at the divine taste of the porridge, admitting that it was only their crushing desperation that forced them to eat the tainted food in the first place. One young man explains that they are all orphans who were trying to build a small business together. Despite the hardships, their friendship kept them going until a mistake with cheap meat nearly ended it all. Salim watches them quietly, moved by their resilience in the face of such a brutal reality. As their heartfelt thanks fill the air, a flood of system notifications flashes before Salim's eyes. He has successfully cured all 7 patients, earning a massive 1,000 experience points for each. With a total gain of 7,000 XP, he levels up instantly, feeling a sudden, intoxicating wave of power surge through his body. He realizes that if he can continue gaining experience at this incredible rate, he'll become truly unstoppable. His internal calculations are interrupted when a small boy tugs on his coat, looking up with wide eyes and thanking the kind young lord for making everyone better. Later, Salim finds himself at a bustling party venue surrounded by the elite. It's been ages since he's been in such a massive crowd, and he knows the road ahead is paved with political schemes, a far cry from the simple, honest days he spent joking around with Amanda. He recalls the suffocating arrogance of his past life as the Duke's heir, a pride that only brought him mockery and hatred. This time, he understands that he must maintain a mask of perfect composure, not out of ego, but to ensure he is never looked down upon again. Determined to rewrite his destiny, he carries himself with the effortless grace of a true high noble. This dramatic shift in his aura doesn't go unnoticed. A group of young noblewomen can't help but stare and whisper in admiration as he glides through the room. The sudden popularity is jarring. Since the entrance ceremony, Salim has been the center of attention, a total reversal of his previous life where his attitude repelled everyone. He even notices Liselotte, the daughter of Viscount Belt, looking at him with genuine admiration, a look she never once gave him in his original timeline. The atmosphere shifts with the arrival of Crown Princess Raphaela, who enters with a surprisingly small entourage. While Valerie finds the lack of attendance strange, Salim explains that the princess simply loathes crowds and petty factionalism, despite technically leading the Academy's most powerful circle. Stepping forward, Salim offers a flawless formal greeting, introducing himself as the firstborn of House Bergman. Princess Raphaela acknowledges him with a chillingly cool demeanor. As they lock eyes, Salim is hit with a terrifying memory. Even in his future as a demon, he was never once able to defeat her. He reflects on her legendary lineage. Between the 2 royal sisters, Raphaela was chosen as the crown princess for one reason: her overwhelming, monstrous magical potential, which was evident from a very early age. Observing her now, she looked fragile, barely 15. Since he remembered her future self, she appeared even younger than he recalled, yet beneath that youthful exterior lay combat skills said to rival the first king himself. Knowing she despised small talk, he kept his greeting short. As he prepared to depart, he stole one last glance at her face, only to find a cold, unreadable mask. Before he could retreat, Lady Gelsomina Durrani approached the princess. Her family had been tasked by the Duke to act as a liaison. She cheerfully praised the princess's grace before mentioning a popular novel, noting how a character mirrored Lord Bergman. He watched from a distance, relieved his own introduction was over. Now, he just had to wait for the others to finish. While getting closer to the princess felt impossible, he recalled that Gelsomina had always been kind to him, even in the future. He pondered the crown princess. Despite her overwhelming strength, she remained cold and indifferent. In terms of sheer versatility and political acumen, however, he suspected the daughter of a certain marquis might actually be her superior. As if summoned by his thoughts, a girl with long dark hair approached. With a graceful curtsy, she introduced herself as Nadia Louiever, the eldest daughter of Marquis Louiever, offering her formal greetings to Salim Bergman. He recognized her instantly, the one rumored to possess even greater potential than the princess. Returning the pleasantry, he told her he looked forward to their next 3 years together at the academy. Nadia agreed, noting her house had sent 24 students, surpassing even Salim's own family. His mind drifted to a future only he remembered, where House Louiever resisted the demon invasion until the bitter end, proving her unmatched leadership. Her voice snapped him back to the present. She revealed that his reputation had already reached her father, the Marquis. She was aware of his magical tools for the poor and his recent use of healing magic for the sick. Placing a hand over her heart, she looked at him with genuine admiration. She declared his altruism truly noble, confessing her desire to emulate his kindness one day. Her knowledge caught him off guard. He had practiced his healing magic in secret, yet she already knew, a subtle display of the Marquis's vast intelligence network. Nearby, Gilbert watched with a scowl, muttering about how much Salim annoyed him. His thoughts were interrupted by a stocky student with a bowl cut. The boy introduced himself as Mark, the third son of Marquis Sarmiento. In his past life, Mark was one of the few friends Salim truly had, and he smiled, hoping to rekindle that bond. However, Mark's expression was unexpectedly cold. He leaned in, asking if they could ever truly be friends, before expressing his hope that Salim would eventually understand the church. The cryptic statement left Salim baffled. As Mark walked away, telling Salim to seek him out once he had repented, the truth clicked. Mark's uncle was the archbishop. Since the Sarmiento lands bordered the Holy Kingdom, an unaffiliated healer like Salim was seen as a heretic. Friendship was off the table. His companions were already reacting to the fallout of the greetings. Gilbert grumbled that the two Marquis families were a headache, while the serious Valerie Meldars insisted they must prove the superiority of the Duke's house. Salim watched their fervor with a sigh. He realized that while these nobles looked elegant, they were fundamentally a warrior class, fueled by pride. It was clear he'd have to keep their tempers in check. He then told his group to mingle with anyone who caught their eye, regardless of status. His gaze drifted across the venue, searching for the commoner hero. An unspoken divide separated the nobles from the commoners, and he realized that approaching the hero now would only draw unnecessary and dangerous attention. The thought triggered a chilling memory. The face of the very hero who, in his previous life, had struck him down after he transformed into a demon. His focus then shifted back to the second key figure in the room, Nadia Louiever, the brilliant daughter of the Marquis. He understood their vital importance to the world. Between the hero's raw power and Nadia's tactical genius, both would be essential if humanity hoped to survive the coming demonic invasion. As Salim resolved to wait for the right moment to approach the group, a familiar voice called out to him. It was Liselotte, who remarked on how much he'd changed since their last encounter. When Salim asked for clarification, she reminded him of their meeting last summer, though for him, a lifetime of tragedy had passed since he began reliving his life. Liselotte continued, noting she'd heard rumors of his recent exploits in the capital, which might explain his new outlook. Salim offered a calculated excuse, claiming that those who master healing magic naturally develop gentler personalities. He hoped this persona would mask his suspiciously rapid growth, and she seemed to buy it, musing that a year ago he acted like a cliché villain. Suddenly, her demeanor shifted entirely. Clasping her hands with a flushed face, she began gushing over how refined he had become, comparing him to a hero from a romance novel. Her imagination began to run wild, leaving Selim utterly bewildered by her sudden transformation from a peer to a total fangirl. He stood there dumbfounded, wondering if Liselotte had always been this eccentric. In the future, he remembered, she was cool, composed, and the embodiment of his ideal type. As she warned him that other noble ladies would soon be hunting for his affection, Selim realized he had completely misjudged the people around him in his previous life. Before he could process the thought, he was swarmed by a group of female students. Princess Raphaela's eyes sparkled as she called him dreamy, while others shyly whispered about wanting to speak with him. The excitement was palpable as the girls urged their friends to catch a glimpse of the new Selim. Surrounded by the unexpected crowd, Selim's mind reeled. This level of popularity was entirely foreign to him. In his first life, nothing like this had ever happened, and he realized his school days were going to be far more chaotic than planned. Behind him, Liselotte winked playfully, teasing him about his first-day popularity, while cheekily warning him not to let anyone snatch him away. Classes finally began at the academy's training grounds. For Selim, this was a second chance at his youth, and he was determined to stay focused. His primary objective was to reach level 50, the system's requirement to awaken his holy attribute and prevent his eventual transformation into a demon. Soon, an instructor ordered the students to don their armor for general swordsmanship. Selim noted that the lesson structure was identical to his previous timeline. A nearby student clarified the rules for the upcoming matches. Body enhancement magic was strictly forbidden, leaving only raw sword skills. Since the armor was enchanted to absorb impact, the students could train hard without fear of serious injury. Following the explanation, the instructor called for volunteers to start the first match. Without a second's hesitation, Mark Sarmiento raised his hand. With a smug look of defiance, he declared that he would be honored to test his skills against the great Lord Selim Bergman. Selim sighed, sensing the thick hostility radiating from Mark. Despite the obvious provocation, he accepted the challenge, seeing it as a perfect opportunity. His mentor, Katya, had often warned him that he relied too heavily on magic, so this restricted duel was the ideal way to sharpen his fundamental swordsmanship. The two students took their positions opposite each other, drawing their practice blades as the rest of the class watched. At the instructor's signal, the match roared to life. As their blades clashed with a heavy ring, Mark smirked, mocking Selim for at least being able to block his opening move. Selim quickly assessed the situation. Without magic to bridge the gap, their raw physical strength was surprisingly evenly matched. However, Mark didn't let up, pressing the attack with a relentless barrage of strikes. Selim struggled to maintain his footing under the force of the blows, realizing that every hit felt incredibly heavy. Given his leaner build and the ban on physical enhancement magic, he was at a severe physical disadvantage. The pressure eventually became too much to withstand. Seeing Selim falter, the instructor called the match and declared Mark the winner. Selim was forced to one knee, panting and defeated, while Mark stood over him, soaking in his moment of triumph. A wide, arrogant grin spread across Mark's face as he internally celebrated. To him, this wasn't just a practice round. He had just beaten the eldest son of a duke, and the feeling of superiority was intoxicating. Mark turned to the whispering crowd to bask in the attention, but Selim just looked up in bewilderment. He couldn't wrap his head around why Mark was so proud. It was merely a restricted practice match where magic was forbidden. Later, as he rested on a bench, his friend Gilbert Benson passionately argued that he should be allowed to fight in Selim's place next time. Gilbert insisted that for a noble, every loss was a stain on their honor, and it was perfectly acceptable to let a skilled subordinate handle such petty challenges. Gilbert was clearly fired up, desperate to protect the prestige of House Bergman. However, Valerie Meldar offered a different perspective, suggesting that while Gilbert was skilled, true growth only comes from facing strong opponents, even in defeat. Hearing this, Gilbert's enthusiasm finally deflated as he realized his proposal wouldn't work. Selim watched them, realizing that with his friends hyping him up like this, the pressure to succeed was only going to grow. He felt a familiar weight settling on his shoulders, the need to live up to the impossible expectations of those around him. He flashed back to his original timeline, where that exact pressure had slowly crushed his spirit. He vividly remembered his first duel against the hero, a crushing loss that had nearly broken his mind and changed his life forever. Selim's thoughts shifted back to the present. In this timeline, the noble-dominated academy completely ignored the commoner hero. He suddenly realized that, so far, the boy hadn't even crossed his path. A harsh realization struck him. It was his own fault. The hero had only gained fame in the original timeline by defeating Selim, but in this life, Selim had lost to Mark instead. He decided he would have to take another humiliating dive for the sake of the hero's growth, offering a silent apology to his friends. Meanwhile, a determined Gilbert vowed he wouldn't lose again. 3 days later, the combat instructor called for practice matches. Mark Armiento immediately stepped forward, smirking at Selim as he demanded a rematch. Selim declined, dismissing the idea of a repetitive lesson. In truth, he needed to find the hero to ensure the boy grew strong enough to face the coming demon threat. But before he could act, Princess Raphaela's clear voice rang out, challenging him to a duel. The challenger stood ready, her sword drawn and her gaze piercingly serious. Selim weighed his options, knowing he couldn't refuse a royal request. He stepped onto the field, reasoning that losing to a legendary princess would be far less shameful than his defeat at Mark's hands. Standing across from her, he noted her delicate, fragile frame. To any other observer, she looked disadvantaged, but Selim knew the terrifying truth hidden beneath that exterior. The duel ignited instantly as she lunged with blinding speed. The pressure was so immense it felt like a storm of blades, the same overwhelming power she'd used against him in the timeline where he became a demon. He barely managed to parry the ferocious strike, their blades locking in a cascade of sparks. They stood frozen for a moment, the sheer force of the collision vibrating through his entire body. Staring into her unwavering eyes, he heard her utter a single command: "Give up." In that moment, he realized her physical stature didn't matter. She was the most battle-hardened warrior he had ever encountered. A week later, a new magic instructor named Stein arrived. He introduced specialized anti-magic armor, then immediately singled out Selim, his former pupil, challenging him to demonstrate his capabilities. Stein mocked Selim, claiming he used to slack off during their private lessons back home. Selim kept his composure, formally greeting his old tutor while masking his growing irritation. He recoiled at Stein's passive-aggressive tone. In his past life, he thought Stein's grueling, endless sessions were a sign of dedication, but now he saw them for what they truly were: a complete waste of time. His first opponent was a noblewoman chosen by lottery. Once the magical armor was secured, she wasted no time, launching a massive fireball directly at Selim's chest. The spell fizzled harmlessly against the armor's glowing runes. Selim stood unmoved, while his opponent stared in disbelief at the equipment's absolute defensive power. Nearby, Nadia Luyever unleashed a barrage of spells against Princess Raphaela, cackling with delight as she flexed her magical prowess. The princess remained completely unfazed by the assault. Watching from the side, Selim noted that for true masters, this specialized armor was nothing more than a redundant toy. Seeing the equipment triggered a dark memory. In the previous timeline, he had used this very same magical gear to cause a horrific incident. The memory grew vivid. Driven mad by his loss to the hero, he had tried to prove his magical superiority, unleashing a lethal ice bullet that left the training grounds in a state of absolute carnage. He had foolishly trusted Stein's assurance that it was safe to unleash his full power. Without gauging his opponent's actual skill, he cast a devastating spell, leaving the young boy with a permanent, life-altering injury. To make matters worse, he'd panicked and cruelly blamed the victim for being weak. This cowardice enraged the hero, who proceeded to beat him senseless, a memory that still haunts him. Shaking off the trauma, Selim resolves to be cautious this time, carefully manifesting a controlled ice bullet. His opponent, a trembling female student, was wide-eyed at the defensive magic of the armor Stein provided. While she knew it could deflect basic spells, she was well aware it wouldn't stand a chance against the overwhelming mana of a high-ranking noble. He watched her reaction with a wry smile. While he intended to hold back, he kept a vigilant eye on the situation just in case. With a confident laugh, he beckoned the others, inviting someone to test their mettle against something truly powerful. His challenge was instantly accepted by Mark Sarmiento, who began channeling a massive surge of energy. With a manic grin, Mark declared he would unleash a devastating earth cannon, hoping to finally paint Selim as the villain of the story. As the spell materialized, Selim moved like a flash, positioning himself to shield Gilbert. A swirling vortex of magic erupted around him as he sternly warned Mark to restrain himself, reminding him that the defensive gear was far from invincible. He demands to know what she's thinking, warning that a direct hit could result in a catastrophe. However, the female student merely waves him off, telling Prince Selim to stay out of it. She insists she was about to show Mark true power, claiming the armor can't handle a noble's strike. When Stein tells him to back off and dismisses the armor as a cheap trinket, Selim sighs. He explains that the gear is dangerously fragile and reminds Mark he's still owed a rematch. To settle the score, he declares he'll fight the girl himself and shatter the armor to prove his point. Confident in her defense, she grants him the first move. Without hesitation, he fires an ice bullet. The spell slams into his own chest plate, the jarring impact vibrating through his body. He notes that the power was calculated perfectly to avoid vital spots while exposing the armor's flaws. The armor spiderwebs under the blow. As the female student gasps in shock, Stein rushes forward, realizing the gear can no longer withstand Mark's magic. Gazing down at the fractured shards, Selim is filled with a bitter regret, cursing himself for ever trusting such faulty equipment. His opponent laughs mockingly, cryptically revealing that in another timeline, she was captured during a kingdom-shattering rebellion. She declares that a mere scratch won't convince him of the danger and prepares a second earth cannon. Selim realizes with grim certainty that she has no intention of stopping. He quickly apologizes to Mark, telling him to brace for the fallout. As his opponent notices him erecting a barrier, Selim launches a lightning-fast counter, an ice cutter. The frozen blades slice through the air, catching her arm and drawing a sharp cry of pain. She clutches her bleeding arm, dismissively claiming a Marquis family healer can fix such a minor wound. But Selim is paralyzed by a system notification only he can see. His experience points have been slashed by 1,000 for intentionally harming another person. A chilling realization sinks in. Hurting others and then belittling them was the exact behavior that made him a pariah in his past life. He fears he's falling into old habits. In contrast, Gilbert Benson cheers wildly, praising him for crushing the Sarmiento girl as the other students roar in approval. He observes his aides, noting their aggressive, hot-blooded nature. He understands that to these nobles, whose honor is everything, his actions were a justified response to Mark's earlier insults in swordsmanship class. In their eyes, the debt has been paid in full. The damaged armor finally shatters into dust. Stein stares in disbelief, unable to fathom how his durable gear failed so spectacularly. Selim explains that a high-ranking noble's mana is on an entirely different level, mocking the idea that such a trinket could offer protection. Stein is left speechless. He stood over his defeated foe as she was tended to by classmates. He expected this display to provoke the hero into a challenge, but the hall remained silent. He realized that since this was a formal duel between nobles with a history, the commoner hero had no reason to intervene. As he processed the silence, Gilbert remarked cheerfully that at least no one was seriously maimed. Even the instructor, Stein, could only offer a hollow agreement, realizing he had no grounds to argue further. Their chatter faded as a new message flickered in his vision. He had gained 100 experience points for acting on behalf of others. A moment of stunned silence turned into pure fury. If the system was going to reward him now, why did it strip away 1,000 points earlier? His sudden outburst left his companions bewildered. Back inside the academy, Gilbert enthusiastically reports that since they dismantled Sarmiento's faction, Selim's reputation has skyrocketed. Valerie concurs, noting that his true abilities are finally being recognized. Reflecting on his initial anxieties, Selim admits that, against all odds, his academy life is actually going smoothly. Selim's expression darkens as he realizes things are spiraling out of control. 3 weeks have passed since enrollment, yet the hero has received absolutely no attention from the academy. He recalls his previous life, where the hero quickly became the center of the world after defeating him in a duel. But in this timeline, that catalyst never happened, leaving the hero in total obscurity. Sipping his drink, Salim ponders the dire consequences. At this academy, students only receive a basic education unless they join a faction, meaning the hero is being denied the elite magic reserved for nobles. If the hero doesn't gain recognition and join a respectable faction soon, he'll never grow strong enough to stand against the demon threat that will eventually destroy them all. He considers approaching the boy directly, but hesitates. As a high-ranking member of the Queen's faction, any involvement from him would be seen as a scandalous political power play. As he weighs his options, Gilbert and Valerie approach, but Salim is fixated on the hero in the distance. He suddenly realizes the pained look on the boy's face isn't hatred. He had completely misjudged the situation. Their conversation is cut short by a sudden, violent commotion echoing from the courtyard as the unmistakable sounds of a brawl fill the air. Gilbert shouts in horror as they witness a group lynching, but Salim notices the hero effortlessly evading every strike. Just as the attackers begin a lethal magic chant, Salim screams for them to stop. Before anyone can move, the hero unleashes his own power, conjuring a devastating gale of wind magic that blasts his attackers away in a single, overwhelming display of force. As the hero turns to leave the stunned crowd behind, Salim calls out to him, while Princess Raphaela and the other noble students watch the departing hero in absolute disbelief. The hero is taken aback by Salim's sudden change in demeanor. Instead of being hostile, the young nobleman is laughing with joy, praising the hero's incredible display of strength. Gilbert is shocked to see Salim smiling so broadly, but Salim ignores him, declaring his intent to spar with the hero and promising to make him smile if he wins the match. The hero dismisses the offer without a second thought, sparking Gilbert's fury over the disrespect shown to the Bergman heir, though Salim finds the hero's blunt attitude refreshing. The hero's gaze sharpens as he addresses the noble by his full name, asking if Salim wasn't just being treated for food poisoning 3 weeks ago, a private detail that leaves Salim completely stunned. The hero recalls the whispers among the other students, who spoke of the Duke's son as if he were a legendary character straight out of a storybook. He then reveals the connection. The very people who treated Salim's illness were the hero's own childhood friends, leaving the young noble to confirm the truth. Realization strikes Salim. He is now indebted to the hero and declares he will accept a duel if that's what it takes to settle things, noting that his intelligence gathering has finally paid off. Princess Raphaela intervenes to manage the spectacle, instructing the group to move to the Bergman family's private training grounds for their duel, a request the hero readily accepts. As they prepare to face one another, the young noble formally reintroduces himself as Salim Bergman, while the hero reveals his name is simply Leo, a common orphan with no surname. Salim tells Leo to drop the formalities and use his first name, permitting the use of both magic and swords in a no-holds-barred fight against the future savior of the world. The duel begins in a blur of motion. Leo lunges, his blade clashing against Salim's in a shower of sparks as a magical circle erupts around them. As their eyes lock, Salim realizes the surreal weight of facing the man who defeated his future self. Salim effortlessly parries the strike, raising a hand to pause the exchange. The spectators, Gilbert included, murmur in awe at his composure, noting how he's giving his opponent free rein to attack. Internally, Salim knows he has more than enough room to breathe. With their blades still locked, Salim acknowledges the hero's undeniable strength. He explains that neither of them will sustain a fatal wound, as their mutual respect for each other's high-level skills allows them to spar with absolute confidence. Leo analyzes the situation. He's facing a 15-year-old version of the man who becomes the Demon King. Recalling his own victory at 17, he knows he holds the edge in experience. But Salim, sensing an opening, unleashes a sudden ice bullet spell. Leo narrowly evades the projectile, though a thin trail of blood appears on his hand. Salim smirks, telling him to stop holding back, as he's well aware of Leo's true potential. He goads the hero into using his intermediate wind magic without hesitation. In response, Leo raises his hand and summons a devastating vortex of wind. Selim's expression shifts to pure ecstasy, urging Leo to unleash even flashier techniques to prove his talent to the world. The audience watches on, completely mesmerized. The display leaves the crowd buzzing with excitement. Gilbert marvels at Leo's raw power, while Valerie questions how a commoner from a royal orphanage could possess such skill. Meanwhile, Princess Raphaela quietly notes just how fascinating her future opponent truly is. As the duel concludes, Gilbert approaches Leo to apologize for Celine's behavior. He explains that nobles are naturally driven to recruit the strong, assuring Leo that the Duke's house is no different and wants to secure his talents with the highest honors. Leo firmly states he has no intention of leaving his home. Selim steps in, telling his friends to back off. He warns against forceful recruitment, noting that turning a hero like Leo into an enemy would be a massive mistake. Leo admits that his current power isn't a true threat yet, noting that his attacks are powerful but predictable. However, he muses that if he were to combine his wind magic with fire magic, the results would be catastrophic for any opponent. Intrigued by the possibility, Selim's eyes light up with excitement. He extends a hand toward Leo, challenging him to attempt the fusion right then and there, convinced that Leo can reach even greater heights of power. Accepting the challenge, Leo's expression hardens with intense focus. A vortex of volatile energy begins to swirl around his outstretched hand, the air crackling with the birth of a brand new power. Gilbert watches in disbelief, amazed that Leo could replicate such complex magic after seeing it only once. Selim, however, finds this talent unsettling. It sparks a desperate need to keep such a dangerous power on his side of the board. Turning back to Leo, Selim warns him that the matter isn't settled. He asks if Leo realizes that his ability to copy the magic of others is a double-edged sword that will bring him nothing but trouble in the future, leaving Leo visibly confused. The other nobles jump in, with Gilbert suggesting a contract with the Bergman Duchy so Leo can utilize their family's secret arts. Leo finds the political maneuvering tedious, but Gilbert insists that in their society, refusing such an offer is a grave insult. Taking charge, Selim instructs Valerie to draft a formal letter to the Cole family on Leo's behalf. He explains to Leo that for a commoner, a letter of recommendation is a vital shield against the forced summons of higher-ranking nobles. He continues his warning, explaining that the academy is governed by treacherous, unwritten rules. Reminding Leo of his earlier confrontation, Selim emphasizes that as a commoner in a school of nobles, he will face constant disrespect and danger. Selim advises that if Leo intends to enroll, he needs official backing to survive. He makes a solemn vow: if Leo ever needs to use his magic in the future, Selim and his companions will be there to provide the necessary cover and support. With his allies standing firmly behind him, Selim formally asks Leo to become his follower. Surrounded by the expectant gazes of the elite, Leo pauses for a moment before meeting Selim's eyes with a faint smile, accepting the offer with a quiet thank you. As the pact is sealed, a notification flashes in Selim's vision, granting him 200 experience points for aiding an isolated classmate. He reflects on Leo's lonely path, realizing that while the hero has faced immense struggles in a world of elitism, he has finally found a circle where his potential can truly bloom. Within the academy grounds, Gilbert Benson notes the arrival of Leo to the Bergman Duchel household, pointing out that both he and the young master, Selim, are only 15. Valerie finds it absurd to assign a peer to Selim at such an age, but Gilbert counters that Leo's status as a commoner hero is a golden opportunity for the academy to distinguish itself. As they bicker, Selim quietly decides to observe the newcomer from afar without interfering. Meanwhile, Leo is reminded that his strength is vital for the nation's future and that he must continue to grow, regardless of his post. He listens with grim determination, knowing that a hero's power is the only thing standing between humanity and the looming demon threat. The weight of this forced recruitment lingers in Selim's mind. He reflects on the kingdom's desperate rush to secure talent, fearing the disaster that awaits if they fail to properly train those they've coerced into service. Fearing his master's silent judgment, Valerie bows with fervent loyalty, vowing to keep a close eye on Leo without overstepping. He then quickly moves to arrange a carriage for their next move. While walking through the stone corridor, Salim informs his attendants that he'll be continuing his pharmacology studies off-campus. He mentions that an elder from his territory, Amanda, has provided him with a letter of introduction to a renowned pharmacist in the capital. Valerie admits his ignorance of pharmacology, while Gilbert eagerly volunteers to tag along. However, Salim stays firm, reminding Valerie of his task with the carriage so they can travel separately. Gilbert protests, claiming to be Salim's right arm, but Valerie calmly insists that he'll be the one escorting their master today. Their constant bickering triggers a bitter memory for Salim. He recalls a time when he was forced to walk with a massive retinue, where every face in the crowd seemed to glare at him with nothing but suspicion and disdain. Gilbert acknowledges that while an heir needs protection, Salim was smothered by his guards in the past. To spare his attendants the burden, Salim now prefers to walk alone, a logic Valerie finds peculiar, noting the irony of an attendant who doesn't actually attend. Gilbert suggests bringing a larger party for future trips, but Salim hesitates. He realizes that showing up at a commoner's home with a massive entourage would be nothing but a nuisance and cause unnecessary trouble for them. As Salim remains lost in thought, Gilbert spots their transport and hails it down. Valerie points toward the parking area, suggesting they head over to board. Within the Grand First Magic Academy, Salim stands by a waiting carriage, watching as Gilbert and Valerie speak with a young noblewoman. He reflects on how students are expected to defend themselves in this world, yet he believes that imposing one's status on others is a grave sin. A mindset he believes is pushing his country to the brink of collapse. Suddenly, his attendants shove the young woman into the carriage as the driver frantically urges them to hurry. Realizing they're trying to flee, Salim sprints toward them, demanding to know what they think they're doing. In response to their desperate escape, Salim calmly raises his hand, and a massive wall of jagged ice erupts from the earth, freezing the carriage and horses in their tracks. He coolly remarks that while he appreciates their concern, their flawed plan was never going to work as long as he had magic to spare. As the ice shatters, a stunned Valerie cries out Salim's name, unable to process what just happened. Quickly regaining his composure, he immediately orders the perpetrators to be detained and calls for the academy staff to handle the situation. Ignoring his attendants' chaos, Salim turns his full attention to the trembling young woman. He gently takes her hand, his expression softening as he asks if she's all right. She looks up at him, her eyes wide and brimming with tears. Visibly shaken, she clutches his hand tightly, struggling to find her voice as she tries to compose herself. He recognizes her as Laura Panetti and realizes she's too traumatized to even stand. Nearby, Gilbert flushes with embarrassment, realizing his scheme to send Valerie away has completely backfired. Gilbert rushes over, frantically stammering that he was only acting out of concern for Salim's safety. Salim tells him to be quiet, noting that Laura is far too distressed to deal with his excuses right now. As he considers his next move, a man in a top hat rushes toward them, calling out for his young mistress. He urgently checks if she's unharmed before turning to Salim, offering a deep apology and identifying himself as a member of the girl's household. The man explains that the girl is Lady Laura, daughter of Viscount Panetti. He had been searching for her after she wandered off to explore the academy's massive grounds, eventually losing her way in the vast parking area. As Salim Bergman watches with a cold gaze, Gilbert insists that he cannot simply leave Laura Panetti behind, vowing to escort her home himself. Salim calls out to his subordinate, his tone leaving no room for argument. It is a known fact that only high-ranking nobles may park their carriages at the academy's entrance, a privilege not extended to quasi-barons, which is why Laura had been cornered in such a secluded area. In response to the crisis, the Panetti family steward directs his staff to contact Valerie at the pharmacy and find a guide for Lady Laura. He explains that she was being isolated and bullied at the academy, lamenting that in their world, the weak are left without allies and become easy prey for the strong. Salim internally reflects on his motives, admitting he only intervened because he saw Gilbert, usually a troublemaker, acting with uncharacteristic concern for Laura. Recognizing his subordinate's feelings, Salim decided to follow, which led him straight to the scene. He recalls that in the future, Gilbert was an exceptional subordinate whose cheerful demeanor always bolstered his reputation. His thoughts are interrupted as Valerie approaches with a report on the Panetti family. She explains they are a merchant house that purchased their quasi-baron title from the king and owned numerous stores. Salim hadn't known of them, as he'd never had dealings with the family before. Valerie concludes that there must be other hidden circumstances at play. Processing this, Salim finds it unthinkable for a quasi-baron to enroll their daughter in an academy meant for the established elite. He deems it a reckless move, as exposing a defenseless girl to a crowd of arrogant and violent nobles was nothing short of foolish. Indeed, back at home, Laura's mother weeps, lamenting that she never should have allowed her daughter to enroll in the first academy. Her husband tries to console her, explaining that he had even asked the ladies-in-waiting of the Durante Palace to look after Laura to prevent such a tragic outcome. That request, however, was ignored. At the academy, Lady Gelsomina Durante refused to even acknowledge Laura, pointedly looking away to snub her. Because of this high society rejection, Laura was left completely isolated and vulnerable. Salim recalls his own interaction with Lady Gelsomina. On the day of the entrance ceremony, she had asked him to act as an intermediary with the princess, citing that the Bergman family also served the palace. He knew then, from his knowledge of the future, that she possessed a treacherous, two-faced nature. His expression darkens with this realization. He thinks of the hero, Leo, and concludes that the people currently surrounding Crown Princess Raphaela are an absolute mess. He considers the Crown Princess's plight. She should have been raised in the best possible environment, but the current king is intentionally fostering only her martial strength. The king believes that by the time she is 18, she will have no choice but to become a puppet for battle, a mere tool defined by her title. Within the Panetti household, Laura's mother pleads with her husband, her voice tight with worry. She insists they must have Laura withdraw from the academy immediately, arguing that continuing on is far too dangerous and that it would be better for her future to just leave. Her husband remains grim, explaining that the right to enroll in the same year as the crown princess was a privilege coveted by everyone. He fears that if they relinquish such a precious position now, they will surely earn the permanent resentment of the other noble families. Elsewhere, Salim Bergman contemplates the unfolding situation, his expression hardening. He recognizes it as a troublesome problem that could spiral out of control, and resolves that he must first speak with his own faction. He gathers his allies, instructing them to keep a close eye on Laura Panetti. Gilbert, ever eager, asks what he can do to help, but Salim dismisses his enthusiasm. While heartfelt, Gilbert wouldn't be of much use in this delicate matter. A memory surfaces in Salim's mind of how this exact problem played out in his past life. His decision to protect Laura was not made lightly, but was based on his knowledge of the future. He knew that by publicly declaring himself her shield, the male students tormenting her would be forced to stop. He was the only one with enough status to prevent the insidious bullying she faced. Salim's primary goal is to support Leo from the shadows, which requires him to gather talented individuals, a natural course of action for a noble. Laura, however, possesses no outstanding talents and is merely a beautiful student of low standing. Why, then, would he go to such lengths for her? In his memory of the past, he recalls how others perceived his actions. Gelsomina Durante gossiped with other students, confirming she was only at the academy to find a high-status partner. Since Laura could never match Salim in status or ability, she could never be his fiancée, and his half-hearted sympathy back then had unintended, disastrous consequences. The result was a torrent of dishonorable rumors. Unable to endure the relentless slander, Laura was eventually forced to withdraw from the academy. The Panetti family, having incurred the collective wrath of the nobility, faced total ruin. Returning to the present, Salim recalls how Gilbert later investigated Laura's fate, discovering she and her family had been forced to move to the countryside. The incident created a permanent rift between them, souring his relationship with a subordinate who had once been so cheerful and direct. He realizes now how clumsy his past response was. To solve this problem correctly this time, he needs a female collaborator. He approaches Liselotte Belt, explaining that his faction is mostly male, and he requires her perspective as a fellow second-year student. He asks for her honest opinion on how to handle the carefully orchestrated bullying against Laura. She gestures toward Gilbert Benson, who is making a scene by loudly claiming Laura as his own. Lisa Lott turns to Salim with a sharp look, questioning if this chaotic spectacle is really his idea of a solution. Salim calmly shuts the idea down, calling the display a clumsy tactic. He explains that getting personally involved would only ruin Laura's life and worsen the bullying. Besides, as a candidate for sainthood bound by the seeker system, a romantic entanglement is out of the question. Lisa completely misreads his logic, letting out a dreamy sigh as her mind drifts into the plot of a romance novel. She imagines a handsome duke rescuing a damsel in distress and wonders aloud if she's stumbled into a legendary love story. Her fantasy spirals out of control as she covers her blushing face. She squeals, claiming she's swooning, and that her heart can't handle hearing such bold words coming from a duke. Salim watches her, bewildered. The composed woman he remembers from the future is nowhere to be found. Realizing Laura's fate is at stake, he knows he must snap Lisa Lott back to reality and force her to focus on a real solution. To break her trance, he firmly grabs her by the shoulders. Locking eyes with her, he commands her to start taking the situation seriously. He leans in close, ignoring the awkward proximity to ensure she's listening. He apologizes for the pressure but insists he needs her help to devise a proper strategy, as he can't resolve this on his own. She stammers his name, her face flushed as he pulls back. Quickly regaining her composure, Lisa suggests that if the Duke can't act personally, there's a powerful female boss in his year who is perfect for the job. He asks who she means, and Lisa clarifies she's talking about the woman with the most commanding presence in his grade, Lady Nadia Louiever. Salim reflects on Nadia. In the future, she was a legendary heroine who fought tirelessly against demons. Knowing her noble heart, he's certain she wouldn't refuse a request to help an innocent girl like Laura. Salim admits to Lisa that his past failures stemmed from trying to do everything alone. Now, he realizes it's better to rely on those more capable. Turning to his aide, he orders Valerie to arrange a meeting with Lady Louiever for the following day. Lisa's mind races. She's always found Lady Louiever intimidating and struggles to deal with her. Despite her nerves, the die is cast. A high-stakes meeting with one of the Academy's most powerful figures is now on the schedule. Noticing her contemplative expression, Salim simply reminds her of the stakes. This isn't about politics, it's about saving a human life. As night falls over the grand estate, Salim can only hope his gamble pays off. He worries about their reception, knowing the outcome of tomorrow's meeting remains dangerously uncertain. Inside a private academy salon, Salim and his group, Gilbert, Valerie, Lisa, and Laura, sit for a formal audience. They face a formidable group of female students across a low table set for tea. The group's leader, Nadia Louiever, introduces herself and her associates, Pamela and Julieta. With a confident smile, she looks Salim in the eye and asks him to state the purpose of their visit. Salim feels a sudden wave of tension. He realizes the Louiever faction is composed almost entirely of women, giving the ornate room an overwhelming atmosphere he finds incredibly unnerving. Sensing his hesitation, Lisa Lott steps in, confirming she has already taken the liberty of assessing the situation on the group's behalf. She elaborates on the danger, explaining that Laura is isolated and vulnerable. Lisa adds that if she were to help Laura directly, she would likely face a dishonorable dismissal from her position. Nadia processes the information, asking if this is why they seek the Louiever faction's influence. She smiles warmly, remarking that Salim is just as kind as the rumors suggest, a comment that catches him completely off guard. Her smile was disarming, yet it felt like a trap. Despite the Pathfinder system labeling him a villain, she seemed intent on finding a spark of goodness to pull him toward the light. He realized her constant praise was merely a polite way to keep him at a distance. A cold realization washed over him. This woman was truly terrifying. Her perceptive eyes met his, confirming his unspoken suspicions. She cut straight to the chase, stating that their business was exactly as she suspected. It was about Laura Panetti. Before he could respond, the salon doors burst open. A frantic student with braided hair rushed in, breathless and desperate to share the latest scandal from the night before. She announced that Salim Bergman had heroically saved Laura Panetti from a group of harassers using powerful magic. The room erupted in gossip about Salim's dashing looks and noble heart, while Lisa Lott noted the scene felt straight out of a legend. Amidst the chatter, Nadia Louiver remained silent, her face a mask of indifference. When Lisa apologized for the disruption, Nadia simply offered a knowing, enigmatic smile. Her mind drifted to a popular romance novel where a nobleman who looked exactly like Salim fell for a commoner, a story that had the entire capital whispering. She couldn't help but feel like the story's villainous, the rival standing in the way of the protagonist's happiness, especially now that Salim was making requests of her. Staring into her tea, she shook off the thought. As the future head of her house, she had no intention of playing a part in some cheap commoner's romance. Her focus shifted to Leo, the commoner hero. She viewed him as a talented but annoying, sly fox who constantly tried to push his insufficient power against her. Nadia turned her sharp assessment towards Salim, admitting that while she respected his history of protecting commoners, good people like him were always the hardest to manage. Salim coolly dismissed the praise, claiming he only helped because the incident happened right in front of him. Nadia smirked, suggesting he was welcome to try and recruit Leo himself. A vision of a different life flashed before Salim's eyes, a future where Leo and Nadia stood side by side as legendary allies. He knew that with the right guidance, Leo would become an unstoppable force. Snapping back to the present, Salim's resolve hardened. He declared with absolute certainty that he would take full responsibility for Laura Panetti's safety. He was caught off guard by her immediate compliance. Nadia leaned in with a confident grin, accepting his plea but hinting that such a favor wouldn't come for free. Her price was simple. She wanted him to join her team for the upcoming academy competition, playfully mocking his hesitation to commit. Salim weighed the consequences. The competition was a showcase of noble power, and a duo consisting of himself and Nadia would be an absolute nightmare for their opponents. Nadia's mask finally slipped, revealing a fiery ambition to crush the royal family, humiliate the provincial lords, and leave Princess Raphaela fuming in their wake. The sheer scale of her plan horrified him. An alliance between the Bergman dukedom and the Louiver family was more than a team-up. It was a direct challenge to the throne. Yet despite the danger, a part of him relished the idea. Swallowing his reservations, he agreed to join her, ready to bring the royalist faction to their knees. With their alliance sealed, Nadia insists they drop the formalities and use first names. Salim agrees, requesting she call him by his name in return. As the terms are finalized, the rest of Nadia's faction approaches. The energetic Pamela Sadi and the more reserved Giulietta Giner announce they'll be joining the team as well. Pamela greets him with infectious energy, while Giulietta offers a more formal introduction, both testing out his first name for the first time. He acknowledges them, privately noting that this is his first time being on a first-name basis with girls from other noble houses. Turning back to the group, he asks if there's anything else they need. As he observes his new teammates, Nadia remarks that Salim rarely ever laughs. Giulietta suggests that since his inner circle is mostly male, he might have simply forgotten how to interact with women. This hits home for Salim. While he was raised with the etiquette of a duke's son, he lacks real experience with peers. Realizing he needs to put in more effort, he offers a quiet apology and resolves to engage with them properly. Turning to the group, he places a hand over his heart in a courtly gesture, expressing his sincere hope that they can all work well together from here on out. This sudden display of charm catches Nadia's faction completely off guard. The girls instantly blush, their hands flying to their faces in a collective, flustered gasp. The reaction puzzles him at first, but as he processes their admiration, a small smirk plays on his lips. He realizes the effect he has on them, and honestly, he doesn't hate it. That satisfaction is short-lived, however, as a system notification jolts him. He's been penalized 10 experience points for having a wicked thought, leaving him absolutely stunned. Shock quickly turns to internal outrage. He screams silently in frustration, wondering how such a harmless thought could possibly warrant a penalty. Later, his frustration continues to simmer. He curses the unreasonable system, tempted to go full villain since he's being punished anyway. But he quickly stops himself before he loses even more XP. As they depart, Gilbert remarks on Salim's brooding mood, while Valerie adds that his speech was incredibly curt. She wonders what Lady Nadia could possibly see in him. Salim then turns to Laura Panetti, who had stayed behind, and gently asks if his mood frightened her. Startled, she denies it with a heavy blush, though her expression betrays her true unease. Meanwhile, Gilbert asks Nadia about her preparations for the upcoming mock battle. She assures him everything is fine, but Valerie coolly notes that unlike some people, they don't leak information to other houses. Elsewhere on the academy grounds, Laura is approached by her friends, who greet her with bright, cheerful smiles. They express their relief, telling her how glad they are she's making friends and that the misunderstandings caused by those meddlesome individuals have finally been resolved. Their chat is cut short when Salim suddenly appears and takes Laura's hand, causing her to drop her handkerchief. His companions watch from afar in a jealous rage, demanding to know what he's doing. Ignoring their glares, Salim smirks down at the surprised Laura, whispering that someone has appeared yet again. Then, as quickly as he arrived, he turns and walks away, leaving Laura completely flustered and blushing in front of her friends. His companions watched the scene unfold in utter disbelief. Gilbert grumbled, unable to fathom why Salim was so fixated on Laura, while Nadia clarified that her own compliance wasn't due to feelings, but a lack of choice. Valerie simply noted that the power gap between them and Salim was an unbridgeable chasm. Gilbert pressed Valerie for an explanation, questioning why Salim would go so far out of his way for Laura. He wondered if Salim's forwardness was a calculated move to erase her insecurities, or if he was being genuinely deeply considerate. While they debated his motives, Laura's friends had already reached their own conclusion. They saw Salim's selfless intervention, protecting a beautiful girl and forcing another house to apologize for no personal gain, as an act of pure heroism. This display of gallantry was exactly why the Academy's female students had become his most devoted supporters. Valerie, however, suspected a much deeper game. He knew the Duke was ambitious, and the Crown Prince was wary, meaning Salim couldn't afford to stand out. By acting like a fool in love, he was creating a smokescreen to lower the Duke's guard while gathering strength in the shadows. Gilbert was stunned by the theory, though Valerie admitted that Salim's recent flustered behavior had even earned him a scolding from their master. Valerie recalled a moment from their youth at Bergman Castle. Duke Bergman had been praising Gilbert's promising swordsmanship, leaving the young boy ecstatic. When the Duke urged his own son to follow suit, Salim responded with a bright, cheerful smile. But Valerie saw a chilling, unsettling emptiness in the boy's eyes that day. Even then, Valerie understood Salim's true nature. He was a master of the shadows, always pushing his subordinates into the spotlight to let them shine while he remained withdrawn, orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. By doing so, he wasn't just leading them, he was molding them. Valerie reached a firm conclusion. Their general was truly formidable. With the mock battle looming, he steeled his resolve, determined to fight his hardest for the future Salim was creating. Standing before the Grand Academy, the mock battle was officially declared open. Brimming with excitement, Gilbert roared his support for his leader, shouting, "Let's do this, Master Salim!" Nearby, Nadia Louisver turned to her teammates, Pamela and Julieta, with a confident smirk. She declared her intention to cooperate as allies for now, eager to show the regional nobles the true, overwhelming strength of their faction. At this bold declaration, Gilbert was momentarily taken aback, managing only a flustered, incoherent response. Watching Nadia with a focused gaze, Gilbert reflected on the 6-on-16 battle they were entering. He acknowledged that while Nadia was as formidable as ever, she was a reliable ally at heart, the kind of person you'd never want to have as an enemy. Their squad, representing the Bourbon House, consisted of Salim, Gilbert, and Liselotte. Allied with them were the members of the Louisver House, Nadia, Pamela, and Julieta. Meanwhile, observing from the sidelines, the hero Leo reflected on his position. Though he was training with the Bergman household, he wasn't an official member yet and couldn't join the fray. He resolved to watch closely and witness their growth firsthand. Outlining their strategy, Nadia explained that while destroying the enemy objective wins the match, defense is just as vital. She proposed a daring plan. The entire team would go on the offensive, leaving Salim as the sole defender. Holding up a gem-like focus, she asked if he could handle the pressure. As the match began, Nadia confidently told Salim to leave the defense to her decoy spells. With a determined grin, she rallied the others, and the group of 4 charged forward into the heart of the battle. Their charge was met with immediate resistance as blades clashed. Gilbert was startled by the strength of his attacker, Valerie, who warned him to stay alert. From the defensive line, Salim recognized his former colleague, questioning if Valerie truly believed a team of first-years could withstand their assault. As sparks flew across the field, Valerie retorted that his team was famous for a reason. Salim realized with dawning horror that they were facing the perennial champions. He gritted his teeth in frustration, wondering how they had ended up in such a desperate situation. Salim stood firm behind a shimmering, intricate barrier, vowing that it would not yield. As the enemy assault intensified, the battlefield descended into chaos. Gilbert shouted for reinforcements, while Liselotte and Pamela braced themselves for the inevitable impact. Under the relentless pressure, the barrier finally shattered into 1,000 fragments. On the other side, Nadia mocked the enemy's pathetic defensive strategy, questioning if they truly thought such a meager effort could stop them, and accusing them of a fatal underestimation. The spectators in the stands were stunned by the sheer power on display, wondering how mere first-years could possess such formidable magic. Valerie, however, remained composed, recognizing the true origin of that overwhelming strength. It was unmistakably the power of the Bergman house. With the second and third rounds of the tournament concluded, Nadia Louiver strides forward with her teammates, a confident smirk playing on her lips as she announces they've officially reached the semifinals. As they depart, Salim Bergman reflects on his tactical gamble of forcing the team leader to act as a defender. It's been a success so far, but now it's time to shift to the next phase of his plan. Liselotte approaches Nadia, remarking on how rare it is for the Queen's classmates to dominate the semifinals, especially since 3 of the 4 remaining teams are led by mere first-years. Tapping her foot impatiently, Nadia admits she's already seen enough to know that these first-years aren't just lucky. They possess genuine, formidable power. Their conversation is cut short by the boisterous arrival of Mark Sarmiento, who mocks Salim's defensive playstyle before declaring with a wide grin how much he's looking forward to crushing him in the semis. As the match kicks off, Mark laughs derisively, calling Salim's team a flashy decoy as he commands his 5-man squad to launch an all-out simultaneous blitz. As the enemy charges, Salim realizes his initial bluff has run its course. His strategy of deception is over, and his true intentions are finally being exposed. The 5 attackers unleash a coordinated magical assault, and Mark cackles at the 5-on-1 odds as a glowing magic circle erupts beneath Salim's feet. Calmly raising a hand, Salim manifests a powerful barrier that effortlessly repels the onslaught, knowing that his past life's mastery of combat makes this victory a mathematical certainty. Salim's cold confidence rattles Mark, as the noble calmly states he has no intention of losing to an opponent he's already figured out, telling Mark he'll need to try much harder than that. With his opponent sprawled on the ground, Nadia Louiver watches from afar, criticizing Salim's risky solo defense, while acknowledging that if he wants to win with a blade, he'd better prove it. Her focus then shifts to the grand stage as the crowd's roar reaches a fever pitch. The final showdown is finally about to begin. On the arena floor, the opposition stands ready. Crown Princess Raphaela steps forward with her teammates, her eyes burning with a bold determination to claim the title. Drawing her rapier, Raphaela points it toward her rival. Meanwhile, Nadia and Liselotte note that Salim is sticking to his defensive role even against the princess as the official signal to start rings out. The moment the match is called, the princess becomes a blur of motion, exploding forward to close the distance in the blink of an eye. Her rapier lunges for the strike, but it stops inches from Salim's face, caught between his fingers as a shimmering barrier flares up, leaving Salim to casually compliment her impressive speed. From the sidelines, Mark Sarmiento analyzes the unfolding clash, realizing that Salim's team is dedicated entirely to defense, a strategy that is the polar opposite of his own aggressive tactics. The battle turns into a high-stakes stalemate, a pure one-on-one duel where Raphaela acknowledges that while he beat her with a sword before, his barrier magic is on an entirely different level. She finds his stoic expression unexpectedly thrilling, realizing she's facing a fellow battle maniac, a revelation that leaves even the usually composed Selim looking slightly taken aback. Her amusement solidifies into fierce determination. Admitting she underestimated him, Raphaela surges with a massive wave of power, declaring she's finally coming at him with everything she's got. She unleashes a maelstrom of magical energy, a furious swirling vortex aimed directly at Selim. He observes the sheer force of the attack, acknowledging that her raw combat power currently surpasses his own. Yet, drawing on his experience of facing overwhelming odds, he calmly assesses her as truly formidable. Despite her overwhelming power, he remains certain he won't lose this contest. His goal isn't to defeat her, but to hold her at bay, buying time for Nadia and the others to break through. He resolves to endure, meticulously conserving his mana by matching his barrier's strength to her relentless assault. As the furious exchange ends, she stares at him in shock. She admits that she had heard rumors of him being a weakling who relied on others, but concedes that he is surprisingly strong. Selim smiles and thanks her for the compliment, though he gently warns her to be more aware of her surroundings, pointing out that her own teammates are in tears. Confused, she questions his meaning. He explains that her immense combat power feels out of place for a young princess, noting that it's a sentiment Nadia has expressed as well. As his words sink in, a look of realization crosses her face. In the arena below, her teammates erupt in cheers, celebrating their victory. The match had concluded while her attention was entirely fixed on him. Moments later, Nadia Louiver triumphantly hoists the championship trophy, declaring victory for the combined Louiver and Bergman team. From his seat, Selim watches the celebration, reflecting that his initial concerns about causing trouble for House Louiver were unfounded. The tournament had concluded smoothly. Beside him, Liselotte chuckles softly. She asks for his thoughts, and he confirms that while there was no trouble, the experience was indeed quite interesting. Elsewhere, Gelsomina Durrani approaches Nadia Louiver. She comments on the final, observing that Nadia seemed preoccupied with the Duke's son during her bout with the princess. Gelsomina then formally introduces herself, declaring that their match has only just begun. Without warning, she lunges forward, striking Nadia with a vicious blow that sends her reeling. Gelsomina explains her actions, stating that since Nadia had previously struck that woman with a punch, she was simply repaying the favor in kind. Back with Selim, Liselotte beams with delight, exclaiming how satisfying that sight was. She turns to him, eager for him to witness the drama, but he appears taken aback by the sudden violence, managing only a quiet, uncertain response. Selim groans internally, completely lost. He wonders how he should even react to the situation. He had tried to act like a gentleman, but he realizes a true lady wouldn't engage in such petty violence. He feels that the discussion surrounding Gelsomina and Laura was entirely inappropriate. As he grapples with these thoughts, he and his companions turn and walk away, leaving Gelsomina standing alone under the archway. Before they get far, Liselotte turns back to Gelsomina with a sly smile. She declares that she will praise Nadia herself without any unnecessary embellishments. She adds that it was a shame she couldn't see Nadia's face during the incident, but watching Selim so devotedly protect her was quite the spectacle. Gelsomina's attention then shifts to Princess Raphaela. She states that thanks to the Crown Prince's influence, she was able to attend the Royal Academy and must therefore study hard. Overhearing this, a bewildered Selim can only stammer about how amazing Nadia is, clearly missing the political undertones of the exchange. The princess remains silent, her expression hardening with resolve as she takes in Gelsomina's words. Behind her, Selim and the others watch on, unaware of the tensions simmering beneath the surface. Her point made, Gelsomina approaches Selim directly, her voice low and steady. She promises him that this humiliation will, one day, be returned. As the attendant to the strongest princess, she has made her intentions clear. Within the academy, Liselotte and her companions discuss the recent mock battle. Liselotte remarks that Selim's magic barrier was formidable, finding it strange he would use it for that particular princess. She muses that while Selim was known for support and recovery magic, she now questions his true capabilities in combat. Nearby, Mark reflects on the events. He concedes that Nadia was right to be wary of Selim, admitting to himself that he took a great risk in trusting her protection to him. He also recalls how Pamela used his own obstruction magic during the semi-finals, acknowledging the impressive power of Nadia's magic. Gelsomina observes from her seat with a knowing look. She thinks to herself that, just as she'd observed, her own obstruction magic was ultimately unnecessary. She recalls a key fact. Selim Bergman, the eldest son of the Duke, had only hastily learned recovery magic just before enrolling in the academy. She continues her assessment while speaking with Nadia. Gelsomina finds it suspicious that Selim suddenly acquired the ability to use recovery magic, an art few can master. Furthermore, church reports state that Selim doesn't belong to any parish and has been treating commoners for free, making him a nuisance to the church, a group she prefers to keep her distance from. Princess Raphaela breaks down the political minefield, explaining that the Luiever territory is a vital hub in the western mountains that trades with dwarves and manages heavy church affairs. However, the Luiever family has fought hard to remain neutral in the church's internal power struggles. She warns that if Selim were to officially join the clergy, it would trigger a massive political crisis for their domain. Gelsomina orders Pamela to keep a close eye on Selim's every move. Pamela agrees instantly, adding with a playful smile that she was planning to watch him like a hawk regardless of her orders. When Juliet joins the group, Pamela voices a nagging suspicion. She mentions that she's met Duke Bergman's son before, but she has absolutely no memory of him being this incredibly handsome. A strange discrepancy she just can't explain. Their confusion stems from memories of an arrogant, unpleasant trio of nobles, Selim, Valerie, and Gilbert, who spent their lives looking down on everyone. That version of Selim is a far cry from the man they see now. Gelsomina agrees, noting that even his aura has shifted. He used to look miserable, as if crushed by a heavy burden, but now he possesses a radiant quality that makes the rumors of his charity work seem plausible. Despite the stark contrast, Pamela is already fully captivated by the new Selim. She gushes about how he protects bullied students and supports Nadia, recalling his impressive yet humble performance in the mock battle. Between his strength and his refreshing honesty, she's convinced he's simply a dream come true. Gelsomina, however, isn't swayed by the charm. She warns them not to be so easily manipulated, suggesting that this saintly persona could all be an elaborate act. A flustered Juliet declares that they must build up a resistance to handsome men, much to Gelsomina's utter exasperation. Blushing at her friend's teasing, Gelsomina tries to maintain her composure as they suggest she invite Selim Bergman to a private tea party. She vehemently refuses, unable to fathom what kind of scheme the mysterious noble might actually be plotting. Her mind races as she tries to reconcile his dazzling public image with the cold reports she's read. The documents detailed his use of rare recovery magic, his aid to commoners, and his decision to release magical tool designs for free. It seemed like he was just trying to win public favor against the church, but meeting him in person made her realize the data didn't tell the whole story. Staring out the window, she makes a final decision. Hearing that Selim is conducting charitable work in the capital, she resolves to spend her next holiday witnessing his actions for herself. Later, Lisa Lott announces she'll also be investigating Selim's movements. Nadia wants to join as well, but explains she must first reply to a letter from her mother. Nearby, Gelsomina speaks with her own mother, who offers a stern reminder to study hard and remain a proper supporter of the crown. The investigation leads her deep into the capital's slums. There, amidst the dilapidated buildings and urban decay, she finally spots him. She isn't alone. Her friends are tailing him as well. They notice Selim's escort has incredibly sharp instincts, so they decide to keep their distance. To stay hidden, Gelsomina begins weaving a complex obstruction spell. In a ruined courtyard, Selim stands at the center of a massive, glowing magical circle. With his hand raised, he begins channeling an immense amount of mana. The energy surges outward, physically mending the cracked and crumbling walls of the surrounding buildings. Gelsomina watches in total awe, recognizing high-tier earth magic executed with surgical precision. Between his recovery and barrier skills, it's now clear his magical prowess is on an entirely different level. He moves from one building to the next, restoring homes and accepting nothing but simple words of gratitude from the stunned residents. Gelsomina continues to watch, her expression unreadable as she tries to process his selflessness. Suddenly, he turns, locking his gaze directly onto her hiding spot. He casually compliments the impressive guard of her noble house, asking if she managed to see through his own concealment magic. He then turns his attention to Nadia, asking if she's enjoying her tour of the capital's downtown. He greets them with a disarming smile, suggesting they treat this as a chance encounter since he knows the area well. Gelsomina cautiously agrees to the charade. With the tension broken, Selim instructs his guards to stand down, thanking her for being reasonable. He then turns back to Nadia, noting that her presence might make Gelsomina feel more at ease. He muses that Gelsomina is a tough nut to crack and won't trust him easily, before suggesting they all visit a nearby open-air market. He leads them through the bustling market, explaining it's a hidden gem rarely frequented by nobles. They stop at a stall selling hand-carved wooden dolls, where an elderly shopkeeper offers one for a single silver coin. From a distance, Gelsomina watches the scene unfold with genuine surprise. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper happily accepts their payment as Selim and Nadia enjoy some local treats together. The pleasant mood evaporates when Nadia confronts the shopkeeper, insisting he's made a mistake. She reveals the coin he gave her isn't a standard silver, but one worth 10 times that amount. The man just scoffs, telling her a noble should know better, before insisting the change is correct. He dismisses her like a confused child, leaving Nadia stunned while Gelsomina fumes at the man's audacity. He continues his tirade, mocking Selim's hand-carved doll and bragging about his own superior craft. To finish his rant, he physically shoves them away from his stall. Selim calmly steps in, offering a silver coin from his own pouch to settle the score. He tells Nadia to let it go, before casually noting that the shopkeeper seems to be suffering from a strained back due to heavy lifting. As he speaks, a faint glow emanates from his hand. The shopkeeper cries out in shock as his chronic pain instantly vanishes. Selim just smiles, claiming he knows a bit of healing before encouraging the stunned man to keep up the good work. As they walk away, Nadia looks at Selim with dead seriousness. She can't believe he just used high-level recovery magic for free, and she demands to know what he actually gained from that exchange. Selim brushes off her interrogation and keeps walking. He offers to buy her a bracelet from a nearby shop as a bonus, before gesturing toward another piece of jewelry to gauge her interest. Before she can even answer, she feels the cold metal of a chain as he fastens a necklace around her neck. She can only murmur in surprise at the sudden, intimate gesture. He steps back to admire his work with a gentle smile. He tells her it looks beautiful, his eyes fixed on the pendant now resting against her skin. Nadia is completely flustered, gasping as she tries to find her words. She looks down at the ornament, realizing it truly is a stunning piece of jewelry. He explains his choice, noting that the delicate wood carving brings the floral design to life. He remarks that the motif of natural vitality perfectly complements her own radiant and healthy beauty. Her face turns bright red at the compliment. She realizes this is a sophisticated social maneuver, praising the item to indirectly praise her. To Nadia, this man is becoming dangerously charming. Selim, however, seems lost in his own thoughts. He muses that while the materials are humble, the craftsmanship is top tier, proving that one should never judge an item's true value at a glance. Suddenly, his face lights up with a genuine grin as he exclaims how great the day has been. He admits he never expected to walk the town with a girl like her, making Nadia blush even harder at his sincerity. He rubs his chin with a bashful look, admitting he has no experience with these kinds of outings. He looks away, confessing that the whole situation is actually quite embarrassing for him. Nadia's mind is reeling. She can't tell if he's a natural or a master manipulator. Whether it's an act or genuine, he is systematically dismantling her defenses, making him the most difficult person she's ever had to handle. As evening falls, Selim suggests they head back, his casual tone masking the internal storm he's stirred within Nadia. She struggles to reconcile this noble young man with the bratty child she once knew, but she's finally convinced of his absolute sincerity. Later, Gelsomina apologizes to Selim for her heat stroke, but he tells her not to worry. While he reassures her, he privately notes the unusually high magic levels of the mansion's servants, trusting his own recovery skills will keep him ahead. It's been 2 months since his arrival in the capital, and his level has been steadily climbing. A system prompt appears, offering to use physical support to accelerate his recovery, which he immediately accepts. The system confirms the boost, and with the quest completion bonus, Selim suddenly rockets to level 40. He's amazed by the massive power spike and eagerly checks his new skill, regenerative healing. Stunned silence follows as the skill's description materializes. It can mend any and all physical trauma instantly. Selim realizes this power is on a completely different level than his old healing magic, which only worked on minor scrapes. Unlike his body enhancement, this new skill is a genuine game changer. Later, Selim stands on a balcony as Valerie approaches, addressing him as young master, while Liselotte gazes out over the railing nearby. He informs Valerie that he can now heal almost any injury. Valerie is shocked, noting that Selim's previous magic was incapable of treating major wounds, even when boosted by body enhancement. Selim clarifies that it's not him casting the magic, but a system performing it automatically. He warns Valerie of this distinction, tasking him with finding and training mages who possess true healing abilities. Understanding the implications, Valerie agrees and rushes off to report to Duke Bergman. As he departs, Selim turns and calls out, "Wait, Liselotte!" She turns from the railing, her expression filled with mild surprise as she wonders why he's called her name. She asks how things went, and Valerie explains that a carrier pigeon was just dispatched. Liselotte confirms she's sent a report to her own territory and offers one of her own birds for their use. Valerie kneels to prepare a report, but Liselotte waves off the formality. She explains it's her private bird and her duty is done, assuring him the Belt family's information network is secure. Her tone shifts to playful affection as she gazes at Selim. She admits the letter was for her sisters, teasing them with tales of the prince's dreamlike life before promising to play with him again later. Suddenly, a bird flutters from its cage and lands on Selim's hand. Liselotte marvels at his animal magnetism, but Selim is perplexed. Animals always avoided him in the past, making him wonder if his presence has changed. As the bird takes flight, Liselotte remarks that it seems to like him more than its own Tamer. Selim watches it go with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Being liked by an animal is a pleasant feeling. Later, in a formal chamber, a nobleman with his arm in a sling is brought forward. His face is etched with pain as he looks toward Selim, desperate for the prince's legendary aid. Without hesitation, Selim begins the treatment. He places his hands over the mangled arm, and a brilliant light erupts. A surge of power flows through him as he performs regenerative healing, hitting level 41. The light fades to reveal a perfectly restored arm. The nobleman is speechless at the impossible recovery, while Valerie declares that no other healer in the kingdom possesses such power. He rushes to Selim's side, gripping his shoulders with joy and praising the incredible feat. However, the effort takes its toll, and Selim's eyes flutter closed as he sways from sheer exhaustion. Later, resting in bed, he reflects on his new skill. Regenerative healing is in a class of its own, but the mana cost is staggering. With a sigh, he realizes he's limited to healing just one person per day. He realizes the skill's true nature. Once activated, it relentlessly drains his mana until the target is fully restored. Using it recklessly would leave him completely vulnerable. To overcome this and reduce the massive mana cost, he needs to increase his proficiency with the skill. Without mastering it, he won't be able to help any more people than he already has. In his office, Valerie weighs the situation. He acknowledges Selim's desire to help everyone, but cautions that this power is too profound to use carelessly. He proposes they wait for the upcoming vacation to begin treatments. Valerie explained that if word of an incurable cure leaked, it would trigger mass hysteria. For now, Selim's power must remain a secret within the ducal house, with a plan to heal the masses during summer vacation. Selim understood the logic, but he couldn't wait until summer. He had a critical mission to complete before the break even started. He urged Valerie to bring him patients immediately, needing to master his new abilities through constant practice. Valerie, sensing his urgency, finally understood his resolve. With the arrangements made, a dark memory from his past life flickered. A catastrophic event was looming just before summer, one that would empower the demons, and Selim was determined to stop it. As the break approached, Salim was stopped in the hallway by a visibly shaken Pamela Sadi. Her face was deathly pale, prompting Salim to ask what was wrong. Her eyes were filled with a mix of agony and defeat. She knew the moment she dreaded had finally arrived. She informed Salim and Giulietta that she was taking a leave of absence to return to the Sadi Berni domain. A vicious demonic beast outbreak had devastated her home, and her mother had been critically injured. Despite her tears, her resolve was steel. She declared she would lead the hunt herself, warning that if even her mother couldn't defeat the beast, the danger was beyond comprehension. Salim crossed his arms and insisted on joining her, even suggesting they enlist the Louiver family. He reminded everyone that Pamela and Nadia are cousins, sharing a bloodline with Baron Louiver. Pamela explained the delicate political situation. While her family was tied to the Louivers, she needed to slay the beast herself to maintain her house's honor and independence. Liselot clarified the stakes. For a noble house to remain sovereign, they must protect their own people from monsters. If the Sadi barony failed to handle this alone, they would lose everything. Salim knew that stubborn pride often leads to tragedy. He proposed a middle ground. If she wouldn't take the Louiver's army, she should at least take him as her personal healer. With a confident wink, he explained that while a ducal house's interference would look bad, he could simply go as a commoner. He claimed to be an expert at playing the part. Liselot joked that he looked a bit too noble for a peasant, but agreed it could work. Giulietta added that his experience secretly treating the king in the capital gave him the perfect cover. When Pamela tried to protest, Liselot shut her down, reminding her that if she died, the Sadi barony died with her. Salim doubled down, urging her to accept his help. Relieved, Pamela finally gave in and thanked him. However, Salim was haunted by a chilling truth. In his past life, Pamela had died during this exact incident. He remembered the darkness that followed. Pamela's death had triggered the ruin of the Louiver family, and to prevent that future, Salim knew he had to annihilate this demonic threat once and for all. Outside the academy, Salim approached Leo with a grim expression, telling him he needed a serious favor. Leo, caught off guard, could only blink in confusion. Salim explained that he was heading to a friend's territory for a demonic hunt and wanted Leo to join him, despite the boy being in the middle of his training. Leo was baffled as to why a high-ranking noble would need a commoner's help. Salim clarified he needed to travel incognito to avoid a political scandal, and Leo was the perfect partner for a commoner disguise. Salim finally admitted his true motive. He needed to borrow Leo's strength. He firmly believed that with a future hero by his side, they could vanquish any demonic beast that crossed their path. Sensing Salim's sincerity, Leo recalled his friend's own unique talents and agreed to the plan. With the party finally assembled, the carriage wheels began to churn, rattling down the uneven road as the group set off for the demonic beast hunt. Back at the academy, Katya debuted a custom uniform that stood out from the standard student attire. Though she worried it looked strange, Valerie reassured her it was a perfect fit. Katya then humbly asked Salim, Valerie, and Leo to look after her as she participated in the event as a regular student. As they prepared, Leo's mind drifted back to a recent memory. Despite being a commoner, he had received a prestigious request from Lady Nadia Louivier at the Bergman estate. She had questioned the rumors of his strength and invited him to join the Louivier estate after hearing the Bergmans failed to recruit him. Leo had firmly rejected her offer, stating his loyalty remained with his work in the capital. Nadia countered with a smile, boasting that her prosperous estate could offer a better deal and allow him to travel. Yet, Leo remained resolute, declaring that his debt to Salim prevented him from serving any other house. His refusal prompted Nadia to mock his unreasonable loyalty, wondering if Salim was merely holding him back. Leo clarified that he wasn't a retainer, but a partner who chose to work alongside them. Nearby, Salim watched the exchange with growing concern, fearing Leo would eventually be scouted away. This recruitment attempt weighed heavily on Salim, who later confronted Leo about the possibility of losing him. He knew Leo was unnaturally strong for a commoner, a man who acted like a saint by healing the sick and repairing homes. A painful realization dawned on Salim. He couldn't possibly tie down such a person. Sensing his friend's inner turmoil, Leo offered him an apple and some much-needed perspective. He thanked Salim for the earnest offer to serve him, but admitted it wasn't a realistic path. He then revealed the true source of his loyalty. Salim had saved his life when he was dying of poison after consuming a demonic beast. Salim reflected on this, realizing that Leo's power had always been the key to their protection. He accepted that Leo was already strong enough to stand on his own and didn't truly need a master. With a heavy heart, Salim told Leo to take his time and decide his final path by graduation. With the matter settled, the group finally set out. Their destination was the Stade Marquisat, located east of the Louisvier territory, a journey that would take a full day by carriage. Upon arriving at the Marquisate, they were met by a young man named Frederick. He greeted Pamela and revealed he had already secured the cooperation of several high-potential commoners from the academy. Pamela was taken aback by her brother's aggressive and calculated resourcefulness. Frederick's confident declaration left Pamela reeling with a sense of dread. The situation was far more politically charged than she had anticipated. While Valerie remained oblivious to the tension, Pamela realized that her mother and her brother held very different, conflicting intentions. The family's history was a web of complications. The Stade Marquisate had been founded by a lower-ranked peer, and their influence was barely enough to sustain the land. 17 years ago, tragedy struck when a plague claimed the lives of the Marquise's wife and parents, leaving him to grieve with 2 small children. Lacking the power to maintain the territory alone, the Stade House was forced to accept a helping hand from the Louisvier. To secure the alliance, Pamela's grandfather had given his own daughter to the head of the Louisvier family as a concubine. It was a cold power move. The Louisvier Marquis intended to gain total influence over the adjacent Stade lands, viewing the marriage arrangement as the perfect opportunity for an eventual takeover. Although the Louisvier eventually acted as guardians for Nadia's mother, their ambitions toward the Stade House never truly vanished. As the successor, Pamela knew she had to be cautious, as this dark history fueled the bitter rivalry between her and Frederick. Upon entering the estate, Pamela found her father, the current Marquis, looking weathered and exhausted. His voice was heavy with the weight of his burdens as he acknowledged her return. She addressed him formally, asking for an update on her mother's condition. The Marquis looked away in shame, telling her to see the bedroom for herself. He insisted on handling the upcoming subjugation mission alone, but Pamela refused to sit idly by while her people suffered. Inside the bedroom, her mother lay still and unconscious. Though she bore no visible external injuries, she had suffered a traumatic blow to the head that left her in a deep coma. A maid explained the dire situation to Pamela and Salim. Though the Marchioness possessed high magical power that had already healed her physical wounds, her consciousness remained locked away, refusing to wake. Salim processed the grim news, resting his hand against his chin. While high-level magic was keeping the Marchioness alive, it couldn't repair the severe brain damage, leaving her in a vegetative state. He checked his mana reserves. Despite using magic for travel, he still had over 80% remaining. However, he quickly calculated that fully healing the Marchioness would drain nearly every ounce of his power. As she stands by the bedside, a voice urges him to wait, explaining that while treatment can be delayed, someone with her level of magic can endure it. Pamela looks on, calling Salim's name in concern, knowing they must join a monster subjugation mission the next day. The following morning, Pamela takes command. She announces that the subjugation unit will head north into the forest, with Frederick leading 20 knights from the Stadi family as the vanguard, while the rest follow behind. Their journey brings them to a small village near the northern forest that was reportedly being ravaged by monsters. However, what they find is a nightmare. The entire village has been burned to the ground, leaving Pamela gasping in horror. The horrific sight is too much for Pamela, who covers her face in despair. Salim watches the scene closely, his expression hardening as he surveys the silent, smoldering ruins. As they move through the wreckage, Valerie reports his findings to Salim. He confirms that while the buildings remain mostly intact, the villagers have been completely wiped out, seemingly devoured by monsters. Salim considers this, noting that while the bodies are gone, the state of the buildings is far too orderly for a chaotic monster attack. The entire scene feels unnervingly calculated. Hadia then calls his attention to a nearby door, pointing out a clean, sharp mark. She immediately identifies it as a precision strike left by a sword. She elaborates, explaining to Selim that the devastation inflicted on the inhabitants wasn't caused by beasts. Furthermore, her sensory magic hadn't detected a single demonic presence on their way to the village. Her eyes narrow as she delivers her grim conclusion. Based on her years of experience as a master swordsman, this wasn't the work of monsters. This was a cold-blooded massacre carried out by humans. The realization finally dawns on them. They haven't been sent to hunt monsters. They've been lured into the center of the Stoddy family's internal power struggle. Back at the estate, the Marchioness had previously voiced her concerns about the family's affairs, the forced engagement between Pamela and Frederick, and the suffocating atmosphere. She had warned that it wouldn't be surprising if something terrible happened. Selim's mind races as he connects the dots. If the former Marchioness and Pamela were eliminated, Frederick would have no obstacles left, yet Frederick lacked the strength for such a feat. Then, a chilling thought strikes him. The Marquis himself had been driven to absolute desperation. He finally understands. The Marquis is no longer thinking about his territory's future or his family legacy. In his madness, he is willing to sacrifice his own wife and daughter. These grim thoughts are confirmed by Pamela's horrified gasp. She stares at a nearby body, realizing that the clean, deep gash could never have been inflicted by a monster's claws. She turns to find Frederick approaching, who coldly explains the truth. He admits that he and his men eliminated the opposition to consolidate power, and he had no choice but to kill Pamela's mother. He then looks at Pamela, claiming her situation is different. His terrifying meaning becomes clear as his soldiers surround her. Frederick draws his sword, declaring that she will die right here. Pamela stares in disbelief, realizing with horror that even her own father is part of this murderous plot. Right on cue, the Marquis himself appears, his face a mask of cold resolve. He points at his son, proclaiming Frederick his successor and commanding him to prove his worth by striking Pamela down. This ultimate betrayal shatters her composure. Pamela can only stammer in denial, her mind reeling as she desperately tries to stay calm, remembering that her allies are still by her side. Before Frederick can make a move, Salim's team leaps into action. He barks out commands. Leo is to restrain the Marquis, Katya will handle the knights, and Gilbert and Valerie must erect a barrier. Finally, he turns to the frozen Pamela, urging her to draw her blade and show Frederick her true resolve. His words strike a chord. With a fierce cry, Pamela draws her weapon, her eyes blazing with determination. She declares that for nobles, succession is determined by strength alone. Frederick merely sneers, telling her that if she has complaints, she can take them to the grave. Their blades clash. She lies defeated on the ground, her sword just out of reach. As she reflects with dismay, she realizes this duel for succession was supposed to be a display of noble aesthetics. But the victor isn't her brother. Instead, Frederick lies unconscious nearby as Celine Bergman stands over him, noting the staggering difference in their power. Katya observes that while Frederick is a stubborn noble, he'll likely recover on his own. Selim then asks Katya what they should do with the man trapped inside their barrier. She advises against execution, explaining that the Stoddy family can't afford to waste any magical potential. Instead, she suggests it would be more profitable to sell his bloodline to another noble house. Pamela, now back on her feet, interjects with a plan. She instructs them to restrain everyone and return to the city, taking full responsibility for confining her father. She adds that the traitorous knights accompanying them must also be bound. She expresses her deep gratitude to the group for their assistance. But as Celine prepares a rope, a sudden, violent surge of dark energy erupts from the ground beneath their feet. The sheer force of the eruption slams against their magical barrier, causing it to crack and splinter. Selim stares in shock, realizing his containment has been violently breached from the inside. Meanwhile, Leo stands grimly amidst the fallen Stoddy knights, his part of the mission now complete. The source of the dark power finally reveals itself. A pair of malevolent eyes burning with murderous intent from deep within the shadows. This horrifying sight confirms Salim's worst fears. Drawing on past experience, He recognizes the terrifying signs of a demon transformation, a being completely consumed by darkness. Beside him, Pamela's voice trembles as she whispers, "Father?"